Tension on deck.
Oh boy. Good afternoon or evening, Ron. How are you?
Good evening. I'm doing okay. Doing
Good,
okay. It's
good.
chilly here, chilly in New York.
It is. It is.
So, a lot going on, as we know. Got a lot to talk about tonight. Um, I think the first thing, let's talk about just before we went on the air last week, we had the tragedy, Washington, D.C.
Hmm.
Two National Guards members were shot. It was very, you know, fluid as we were on the air. So there was conflicting reports, but as we know now that specialist Sarah Beckstrom has passed away. So our thoughts and prayers are with her father, her family, her fellow National Guardsmen for this tragedy that's happened, as well as our thoughts are with National Guardsman Andrew Wolf, who was critically injured, but there's been some signs of positive changes, we'll say, in his condition. So, your initial thoughts, and we'll just throw up a quick news video on the update.
Yeah, heart goes out. Heartfelt, feelings go out to Sarah and her family. I mean, she's. I think she's 20 years old.
Yeah.
A young woman had her whole life ahead of her, tragically taken. And then, our prayers and hope that he makes a full recovery. That like you said, there's been signs of improvement. Gave the thumbs up, right? So let's hope that he makes a full recovery, gets back on it. Tragic event. It's a terroristic event. It was a tragedy, and clearly ambushed. So you know, yeah. Our thoughts and prayers are to both families, and we wish for a speedy and healthy recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. And the terrorist who committed this heinous act has been formally charged, uh, and is charged with first degree murder and attempted murder and weapons possession. Um, Horrific, as we stated last week. Evidence has come out that after he shot them, went down, he stood over them and emptied the rest of his gun, supposedly, into the two guardsmen. So it's just horrific. It's we didn't know at the time any nationality or anything like that. Now we know that he was an Afghan national who worked with the CIA overseas and was brought here in that mass exodus from Afghan, where thousands were brought over. He was brought over with his wife and children, which I have no problem with, people that were properly vetted and worked with our government to help our government during the conflict. And obviously, someone asked, well, why is this kids coming? And, because if they left their family behind, their family would be slaughtered, by the Taliban or whoever. So, but obviously it's come out since, even though there were several news reports, and when the questions arose and the congressional hearings happened, everyone swore up and down in the Biden administration that every one of these people were properly vetted. And now it's coming out that obviously they were not. So that's just a horrible thing. So let's just take a quick look at a news report on the update.
Tonight, newly released surveillance images showing the suspect outside a Washington, D.C. metro station 1 minute before prosecutors say he unleashed his deadly ambush, running around the corner and opening fire on National Guard soldiers on patrol, continuing to shoot, then bending down and looking at their bodies on the ground. Prosecutors say the suspect yelled "Allahu Akbar" and that he was subdued as he was reloading. In a virtual hearing appearing from a hospital bed, Ramanullah Lakhanwal pleaded not guilty to all charges, including first-degree murder. Lakhanwal is an Afghan national and had worked with the CIA in Afghanistan. He was brought to the U.S. during the Biden administration after the chaotic U.S. withdrawal. The Trump administration says there was no proper vetting.
Make no mistake, there's no vetting. We have no idea who he is. He has no connections to the community.
President Trump has halted all visa processing for people from Afghanistan. 24-year-old Staff Sergeant Andrew Wolf was critically injured in the attack. 20-year-old specialist Sarah Beckstrom was killed.
She was like a perfect human being. 20 years old, just started. She was like a baby. She told her parents that she was getting a promotion, and they were so proud of her. Then they get a call that this happened.
All right, Ryan Nobles joins us now in studio. So, Ryan, I know you have some new reporting about that other National Guard soldier, the one who survived, and how he's doing tonight.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. Andrew Wolf remains in serious condition, but there are signs that he's improving. West Virginia's governor said that he was able to wiggle his toes and give the nurses in his hospital room a thumbs up, but Tommy still has a very long and difficult recovery ahead of him.
All right, Ryan Nobles. Ryan, we thank you.
Well, there you have it. I mean, I guess I previewed that video better than I forgot where I got that information from. But yeah, just horrible. It's just horrible, and it kind of builds on everything that we're talking about. We're going to talk about tonight a little later on with the ICE conflict that happened here over the weekend in New York City, and you know, it all kind of intertwines where you have a lot of rhetoric going on, supporting public protests and whatnot of ICE operations and any kind of immigration operations, and the National Guard is out not because of ICE, but because of violence and crime that was going on in Washington, D.C. But again, it's really a lot of, anti-establishment and, anti-government, with the current administration. So I guess, anti-Trump, whatever you want to call it, and his policies. So any final thoughts on that?
Just you can see how politics plays into it, and the proper vetting of everybody that comes into this country. When you have open borders or you bring in people that aren't properly vetted, there's always a possibility of radicalization, and then sometimes a possibility of them hurting American citizens. So it's important, and we'll talk about the demonstrations and everything else that are against this ICE and taking people off the streets that really don't belong. But in reality, I mean, we want people to come into this country, but we want them to come in legally and vetted so that they understand this country and will support the country. So, but just to Lily and 92 Charlie, yes, I did get a haircut, and yes, it is nice and high and tight. I don't know, I can't get away from it. You are due. I don't know. You almost have the gross mutton chops.
You don't have. You don't have much. It's like you want to hold on to it. I don't want to give it even to the barber. But yeah. So I mean, last week our main topic, we spoke about the chaos at the synagogue, right, and how a poorly planned event that was a permitted protest, turned into chaos, and the SRG was called in, and then you had the counter protest, and they were both set up right outside the front of the synagogue. The mayor was overseas on his farewell tour, getting his awards in Uzbekistan or wherever he was, and he wanted to make sure everything went fine because he heard about it. Only heard about it because of the political connections, because it wasn't a big protest. It wasn't a major protest, and it was very easily could have been handled at the command level. But we discussed it in depth last week. The basis of the protest is irrelevant, but they weren't happy, and obviously, so since then, the NYPD has it came out in the Daily News that the NYPD grills commanders in an investigation in the handling of the Park East Synagogue protest, right? So this is broken by, the Daily News, Chris Sommerfeld, and he's one of their editors, right? NYPD Internal Affairs is investigating the department's response to this month's raucous pro-Palestinian protest, which I really don't think it was pro-Palestinian, but outside the Park East Synagogue, a move that comes after Mayor Adams grew angry with Commissioner Tisch over the incident. So that comes out, and when you start looking at the article, right, it says Internal Affairs Group 1, which handles investigations of captains and above, as well as Internal Affairs itself, has conducted official interviews of Chief Manhattan North Ruel Stevenson, his exec, Eric Pagan, who's the deputy chief, Inspector Andrew Natu, who's the Borough Operations Commander. For those who don't know what the Operations Commander does, they basically are in charge of operations. They're in charge of details. They're in charge of anything that's going on enforcement-wise within the borough. They oversee the precincts in that borough. And Noreen Lazarus, who is the CO of the 19th precinct, we spoke about her last week and what we think that her culpability is in this. The investigation is focused on who from the Borough Command should have responded to oversee the scene, in addition to questions about whether the protesters were allowed to get too close to the entrance of the house of worship, sources say. So, I mean, really, Adams, who was on his trip to Israel and Uzbekistan when the protest played out, posted a tweet condemning it as totally unacceptable, which we don't disagree, and questioned the police handling of the incident, which we really don't disagree. Adams privately expressed his displeasure to Tisch for insufficient policing of the event. A source with direct knowledge of the conversation said he was very mad, honestly, the most mad I've ever seen him with her. The source said, I'm sure that partially contributed to the apology because an apology was given. I think we talked about it last week, right? That Tisch came out and she apologized and said that we weren't on point with the way that the protest was set up, which we all agree with. And lastly, when Fabian Levin, who's Adams' spokesperson, was asked about the IAB investigation, he said that the local precinct commander's response to the November 19th demonstration did not meet expectations. So do you disagree with any of those statements, Rob?
Any of those statements? I mean, I don't know why they're so mad about it. I mean, yeah, was there something done wrong? Absolutely. To be fuming mad over. I mean, I personally would be more mad about when a large group takes over, 7th Avenue and you can't even get down the block. I mean, that I would be mad about. But a protest that kind of went awry. Yeah, there were definitely mistakes, and sure there should be some sort of accountability. Like we've discussed offline, was it necessary for Internal Affairs Bureau Group 1 to get involved in it? I don't know. I have my reasons why I think they did, but
we'll get into that. And like you said, we posted on the Executive Perspective podcast on X, right? Follow us at Exec Perspective. I don't understand how a poorly planned, permitted protest, which definitely fell short of the standards of the NYPD, has become an investigation of misconduct by the NYPD Internal Affairs Bureau. Poor planning? Yes. Poor execution? Yes. Poor executive oversight? Yes. Poor crowd control? Yes. Poor tactics? Yes. Executive misconduct? No. Oh, I spelled executive wrong. No. Right? Because what does the Internal Affairs Bureau, like what is their role? Right? For those of you who are not NYPD, right? The Internal Affairs Bureau is dedicated to preserving the integrity. This is right off the NYPD website, or the New York City website, which is critical to the function of the police department in fighting corruption within the NYPD. The department cannot successfully serve the public without maintaining the public's trust. IAB helps to ensure that trust by detecting, investigating, and bringing to justice the small number of New York City police officers and civilians who engage in misconduct and corruption. And again, for those who aren't familiar with the structure of the NYPD and Internal Affairs, right, Rob? You want to go through this?
Well, you can see that the Chief of Internal Affairs, right underneath him, you have the executive officer, but to the left of that on your screen, you see with the Special Investigations Unit, and that's where Group 1 is. So you literally have where Group 1 reports directly to the Chief of Internal Affairs. That just shows the significance of the unit, and really, their need to investigate, and make sure that things don't leak to the people that they're investigating. So yeah, there's the hierarchy is right there, and it's an important job and function, but does it raise to the level of a detail gone wrong? I don't necessarily think so.
Right. Internal Affairs is there for misconduct and corruption. Like, this is just poor handling of a detail. So now you have a Borough Commander, Ruel Stevenson. What is his culpability? Like, that Internal Affairs will be looking at him. He's the Borough Commander. So obviously, listen, when you're the boss, the buck stops with you, right? So he's the boss of Manhattan North. The detail happened in the 19th precinct. 19th precinct is in the confines of Manhattan North. Okay. So ultimately, he's supposed to oversee everything that happens. Is he getting involved in this detail? He's not. He's got nothing to do with this detail.
No, I mean, he's getting notified, but that's about it, maybe, right?
Right. You got Eric Pagan, who's a deputy chief. There's a picture of him as an inspector. As a deputy chief, he's the executive officer of Patrol Borough Manhattan North. What his involvement is, I don't know. I'm going to assume it's a Saturday. He was probably working, and he was the highest executive that's in the Patrol Borough. He's probably the executive officer of operations, right? Which means that he oversees the operations portion. There's an administrative executive officer and an operational executive officer in patrol boroughs, right? So he's probably the operations executive officer. I don't know for sure, right? So maybe he oversees all the details that happen in Manhattan North. So are they looking at him for that?
I will tell you, this is my thought, why IAB got involved. And this is why IAB Group 1 investigates, captains and above. So
Right.
they're going to be the ones doing the investigation. But I feel that because Tish put a thumbnail on it, and the mayor also expressed his disconcern for it, they felt that, all right, let's get IAB Group 1 to show that, oh, it's serious and we're taking a serious look at it, when it wasn't necessary. But it's also to lock them into their statements and to everything that's done, so that if something is found out later on that wasn't done that they said, then they can hang their hat on that. Because when you do the GO 15, the General Order 15, right? It's a taped conversation. It's done by a higher rank, so that you have to answer, questions specifically directed and narrowly related to your duties. So I can see why they want to, make sure you're locked into your statements, so that if something happens later on, then they could hang you even worse. But to me, this just looks like it was a, like we said in the beginning of the show, right? A fishing expedition for IAB. It was just for them to throw out the line, and they're looking to catch somebody to make an example of them. So I don't know,
Yeah, Reed here says, Chief Thompson will do anything the PC wants. She promoted him from 1-star to 3-star in less than 45 days. I've had dealings with Chief Thompson when he was the CEO of Group 1, and I was an executive, and I didn't have a real problem with him. I thought he was a pretty straight shooter. He was an IAB guy, but he's a career IAB guy, and he got put in charge of IAB after Tish was made the police commissioner, and they moved out the former chief of IAB because of improprieties that were found under the investigations for Madry, for Chief Madry and so forth. So I have no problem with him going from one star to the chief of IAB. He's definitely got the resume for it. He's been an executive and a lifer in internal affairs. So I don't have that. As far as him doing whatever she says, listen, if the police commissioner says conduct an investigation, you're going to conduct an investigation. I don't see any misconduct. This is administratively a mess. Whoever put this detail together didn't put the detail together properly. We talked about it last week. We put up the map. We showed where I think that they should have placed the protesters, the counter protesters, so they have sight and sound to the synagogue, which they were protesting, and the counter protesters have sight and sound to the protesters who they're counter protesting. Things should have been put in place. The barrier should have been placed beforehand. It appeared from certain videos that they were kind of running free in front of the place, and then SRG came in, pushed some barriers up, and placed them in place. They kind of got, at that point, it's a lot more difficult to wrangle them up. But again, it's just poor planning. Now, looking at the, this is Andrew Natu. I think he's an inspector now. And he's the operations commander. So he's probably the one that signed off on the detail request when the precinct put the detail request together. Because for those who don't know, as much chaos as it looked like, it wasn't a lot of people. It wasn't a huge detail.
No, it wasn't bad.
It wasn't bad. It wasn't a huge detail. It wasn't large. It could have been policed by a very small detail because they were somewhat orderly. Yes, they're screaming. The things that they were saying were vile, and people don't like what they were saying, but they have the First Amendment right to say whatever they want. They weren't threatening. The counter protesters were yelling back at them. That's fine. You're allowed to do that. That's your First Amendment right, and it's our job to protect you and protect your First Amendment right. So that detail didn't need to be a huge detail. The detail didn't get out of control. Where the issue arises is that it blocked the entrance and egress to the front of the synagogue where worshipers couldn't get in and out freely and safely. So that's where it became an issue. And obviously there's political connections to the synagogue. So, all of that being said, there's also, I read something, and I couldn't find it to bring it up, but I read something that the CO and Deputy Inspector Lazarus was off, and they were questioning her leave, whether she had. Listen, it doesn't have to be your annual vacation, especially as an executive, as we all know, Rob, right? How many days are you working? You put so much time on the books because you work so long of hours. You have all this time that you're going to take advantage of taking some time off. It was a holiday weekend. She probably took off. Was it a vacation pick? Probably not. But so now something happens at your command. Yeah, it sucks. You get caught with your pants down, so to speak, where something happened in your command. You weren't there, but you weren't working. But if you're not there, you got to make sure your XO is working. You got to detail that weekend at, a protest. Your XO should have been working and should have been there.
Yeah, if she takes off, she takes off. Obviously you can have somebody else fill in for you or whatever. But listen, as what I remember when I was the the XO in the 2-3 or whatever, and I wanted to take off, I'd submit my 28 to the CO. Now, when the CO took off, he didn't submit it to me. He submitted it to the admin, the adjunt or somebody in the borough that would authorize the day off. And then then the normal question would be like, who's covering the command when you're off? And then you would say, all right, my XO's here. So you can't blame her for taking off, but and did she know there was a detail and she put the 20 in later? I don't know, whatever it is, but she was off, and she had to cover, and that may be the reason why it's falling on, the XO in the borough, because maybe there's other things that went on, such as, hey, you can have off, or you can have, we'll cover you or whatever. So just with hard X core, I dimmed 2 lights. I just want to make sure that's if that's better for you. I don't know. He said it was too white and bright for him, so I did dim two lights. I took off. So if it's not, I can make additional adjustments.
And
I
here,
don't want to blind anybody.
J Ramming 26 is saying, the problem is that the 19th precinct CO being off, and she wasn't supposed to be, but that's a rumor. And again, even if she banged in, even if she wasn't scheduled to take off and she took off. Listen, I was a precinct commander in 2 different precincts. It's the weekend. I'm not bothering a borough executive on the weekend if I'm not coming in. Sometimes you're rolling the dice. If I'm not going to come in, I got nothing on the schedule. But if she banged in and she knew that there was a protest 2 doors down at the synagogue, maybe that's questionable if your XO is not working. But your XO, maybe your XO was working. Maybe your XO had the duty, and he or she was going to be in anyway. So, you take these things into consideration.
You just brought up a really good point. Like, if I'm the duty captain, or I'm the duty inspector, or even the duty chief, somebody should have told me that, hey, there's something going on in the 19th precinct that you may want to give special attention to. So, if whether she's off or not, right? Because anything could happen. A pop-up could happen. Anything can happen. And technically, I would say that the borough had the responsibility to notify, somebody that was going to be there. Now, if Eric Pagan was working and he knew about it, well, then maybe that's why the responsibility fell on him. But, that's something you should know. I mean, when I was a duty chief and you call operations, they would usually give me a rundown of everything that's going on. They'd be like, all right, we got this protest, who's covering that, this, that, and the other thing. So I knew. And then if something happened, I could call over and say, hey, is everything all right? Yeah, everything's good. I don't need any other resources or whatever, or I need additional resources. So, I mean, that's what operations is for. So did operations make the proper notifications? Did operation tell people it's going a little awry? So, I mean, there's all things to look at. So,
yeah. And the same thing, like you said, the duty inspector and the duty captain, right? They have to call into the borough.
Right.
Now, what does the borough tell you? What do I want to know when I call into the borough? I want to know who's working, because that way I know whether there's executive coverage in the command, because I ain't going there if there's executive coverage in the command. That's a command I don't have to worry about covering for oversight, right? And if there's anything going on, any details, right? And also they tell you, of course, they always tell you about hospitalized prisoners, right?
Yeah.
And so you're aware of what's going on in the borough that you're working. Now, Yankee Kid, 6432 Yankee Kid is saying that word has it the borough CO and XO were both working. Okay. So at that point, they're really not going to know about this until it pops off. And now they got an incident, and the 19th precinct is calling the borough saying that we have a protest that's a little bit out of control, or they hear over the radio that they're calling for a level 1 mobilization for crowd control. Right?
I mean, Manhattan North was pretty good. I remember because I used to have the duty there, not only as the duty captain, but also as a duty inspector. I had the borough, Manhattan North was my borough. And on occasion, we cover Manhattan South too, when, they on certain weekdays or weekends or whatever. But they were pretty good. They would have a list of everything that's going on. So you would know what details. And I'm sure the borough commander and the borough XO knew there was a demonstration going on, knew there was going to be something. Whether or not they thought it was going to get out of control or not, I referred it to Timmy Boudet, right? When Timmy Boudet is at every freaking detail with his microphone, and he's probably at home with his microphone. Pass the gravy, honey.
Megaphone.
Yeah, he's I need more turkey. So, but he's a great guy, and he's
Step
out there
off the street, or you're going to be arrested.
That's it.
Listen, he's giving a fair warning.
Yeah.
You love that thing.
So do I think maybe maybe Eric Pagan, if he was the XO working, he should have been there. He at least should have stopped by and seen what's going on. Sometimes you got to get out of the chair. And I'm not saying Eric didn't. Maybe he went there and it was peaceful and then it turned ugly later. But then there should have been notifications, you know? So.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know. To be honest with you, dealing with details and everything else, it's a permitted event. That's a big thing to me. It's a permitted event. So we know who the people are that are going to be there. We have that intelligence. So we also know what type of protests that group has been involved in the past and whether they were problematic or not.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing to me, is that I have that intel. It's not at a pop-up demonstration. You don't know who's there. They're paid agitators. We're going to talk about that in the next segment and things like that. But this was a permanent event. So you knew who was going to be there. You knew if they had problems in the past. So like I said earlier, this may have been a 1 in 8 detail, which is like a 1 sergeant, 8 police officers, detail, because you didn't expect to be problematic, but it was poorly set up. You weren't being preventative, right? My wife always says it: prevention, 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 right? Set up the barriers. This is where you're going to be. You're going to be over here. Set up the barriers. This is where the counter protesters are going to be, even when they show up, because we know that when this group shows up, there's always going to be counter protesters, right? And so, again, it's piss poor preparation, right? Poor preparation equals piss poor performance, right? So this was poor preparation. I don't know that a chief needed to stop by even until after it blew up. Then obviously, somebody get out of your, and maybe that's what happened. Maybe they never showed up. But again, does that rise to internal affairs being involved? Group 1 being involved? That's for misconduct. Unless there's more to it that we don't know. That it was alleged, maybe they looked into it and the two of them were out to dinner somewhere and they blew it off and didn't answer up, or whatever the case may be. Now you're looking at maybe misuse of time or whatever the case may be. But I mean, you're still allowed to eat, right? So I just don't know where something that in the big picture of things isn't a huge deal, because thankfully nobody got hurt. Nobody was arrested. No officers were injured. No civilians were injured. That's the big thing, right? That's the big thing. Yeah, they effed up. They blocked the entrance, pretty much. I mean, the front doors were accessible, but then you're walking out into the crowd and they're right on top of them, which is not appropriate. So I can't. And again, we don't have all of the information, but from everything you're seeing, the mayor got pissed off, so he's sicking the dogs on them, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the two of them were angry, the mayor and the police commissioner, and they did. They sent out the dogs. They sent out IAB Group 1, and you know what? It puts a little fear in everybody, because you don't want to get interviewed by IAB Group 1. I mean, and what are they locking you into? What are they going to ask you? So I don't know. To me, it looks like it was a political hit, that they were looking to hang somebody and get somebody to be the fall guy. Like we said, there was a fishing expedition. Who can we get? If we can't get Stevenson, can we get Pagan? If we can't get Pagan, can we get the operations inspector? So I mean, to me, they were looking for somebody. They were looking for blood, and AA says in the chat, it says the NYPD Internal Affairs Bureau is deeply involved in selective cherry picking. Now I'll go back to Thompson. Think about Thompson. Thompson was an IEB guy. He got promoted, double bumped, right, to a 3-star from a 1-star under Jessica Tisch. His allegiance is going to be to Jessica Tisch. And if Tisch says, I want to find out, and I want blood, I want somebody, well, then Thompson's going to find somebody. So I think that's all it was. Was it necessary? Probably not, to have Group 1 or Group. It could have been done anyway. It could have been done anyway as a police commissioner. You didn't have to have IAB come in and do GO15s and start asking questions. But she could have done it right off the bat. I don't like what you did. Who was in charge? She could have done it. Technically, a GO15 doesn't have to be electronically recorded, right? When a rank talks, when a higher rank talks to a low rank, technically it becomes a GO15 no matter what, because the way the rank structure is. But that being said, she wanted it on tape. Now, who knows? Maybe she wanted to hear let me hear the transcripts. Let me hear what's being said. And then she's going after somebody, I mean, like the only thing that I say with that detail is we've known that there was Palestinian protesters around the city, and there was Jewish protesters throughout the city. So it has the potential for maybe not so much violence, but it has the potential to get very heated. So did it require somebody? Probably not. But hindsight being 2020, somebody else, somebody of a higher rank should have been out there and checked it out to make sure that everything was going good. Now, like we said, I don't know if they did or they didn't, but I know I would have want to know. I would have, if I was the duty chief, the duty inspector, duty captain, I would have want to known about it. And I may have stopped by just to see what's going on. I may even circled back a second time. That's me, especially if the CO is not working, because you used to get a list of everybody that's working, right? Because like you said, I wouldn't go visit the 19th precinct if I knew the CO was working. And if I didn't know, if I didn't know the CO was working, if she was doing it unannounced, right? So in other words, she didn't tell on the sheet that she was working and she just came in an unannounced tour. If I went in and she was there and I was the duty captain, I would have said, Inspector, how you doing? I would just sign the command log. I'd never sign the interrupted patrol log because it's her house and that's who's inside the precinct. That's what the interrupted patrol log is. And then I'd say I'd show respect to her and I would walk out and go back to my tour. But I wouldn't normally go in if I knew the XO or the CO was working. That's they're in charge of their station house. So I think I definitely would have been there knowing that she was off and there was a demonstration going on. So I don't know.
I'm sorry. I just can't. Like you said, I had a cop one time tell me, I showed up at the scene and I said, "What's going on?" He goes, "I'm not talking to you without my delegate." I said, "What?" "I'm not answering any questions without a delegate." I said, "Officer, you don't have that option. This is an ongoing police incident. This is not, an internal investigation. You don't have the right to refuse to answer my questions right now." So I had to say to him, I said, "I'm giving you a direct order to inform me as to what's going on at this situation from the time you got here. What information have you gathered about this incident? And if you don't tell me, you're going to be suspended." I mean, silliness. You don't always have to invoke the union, your union rights of representation to answer questions. We talk about it all the time on the show. What do you do after every incident, Rob?
Oh, we debriefed. We did a hot wash.
100%. So what are we doing with this incident? You got to do a hot wash. What the hell went wrong? Do we need internal affairs? Group one, obviously, like you said, they fall right under the chief, report directly to Chief Thompson, the chief of internal affairs. 100% I agree. If internal affairs is going to be involved, it has to be group one because you're talking about executives. So right there, you have to have group one. But why internal affairs at all? Why, if you have the borough commander is going to be questioned as to what the hell happened, then why isn't the chief of patrol saying, "I want you in my office Monday morning at 8 o'clock with all the answers. Bring whoever you want. I want all the answers Monday morning in my office, Monday morning at 8 a.m. And Ruel would have to scramble all day Sunday, call everybody in, do whatever he had to do to get every answer that he needed to get to be able to intelligently respond to the chief of patrol, because that's who Ruel Stevenson answers to directly in the direct chain of command. We all answer to the police commissioner, obviously, right? And ultimately the mayor. But in the chain of command, you have the chief of patrol oversees the patrol borough commanders. So you have a patrol borough commander. If you're going to question the patrol borough commander, it's got to be a higher rank. Technically, right? I mean, under when you get investigated, they always ask you, do you mind someone lower
Yeah, you
rank
could, right,
asking?
if you don't
You
mind.
can, right? But what would be wrong with the chief of patrol? I've gotten calls as a precinct commander from the borough commander. Ron, what the F? I've gotten calls directly from the chief of patrol. Ron, what the F? I've gotten calls from the chief of department. Ron, I better not get to the scene before you. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, no problem, boss. I'm working. I'm like a block out. You know? And do I say, oh, I call my union rep? No, I have an obligation to inform my superiors. And like you said, it's a hot wash. This protest went bad, right? The operational portion of this protest went bad. Thankfully, that's all that went bad. So let's do a hot wash. What did we do wrong? What could we do better next time? And if it's that bad, who was responsible for what went wrong? And we're going to take remedial action against that person. And if it's the precinct CO who didn't put the detail together, then banged in, didn't have anybody covering it, and the shit went sideways, well, you know what? Then maybe she shouldn't be a precinct commander. It's a big responsibility to be a precinct commander. And yeah, you take some liberties. You're going to take days off. Sometimes you're rolling the dice, right? Sometimes it's better to ask for forgiveness, beg for forgiveness than to ask for permission. So some days you just don't go in. We've all done it, right? I'm not going to bother. Listen, you just have to call the borough and say, listen, can I take off? And I've never been denied. But I'm not going to bother a chief on the weekend. Now, if I knew that Eric was working, I would have called up and said, hey, boss, listen, not feeling that great today, or, got an unexpected family dropped in, whatever. I got a little detail going on, but Rob's going to handle it for me. Okay, no problem. That's how you handle these things. You don't just bang in. So she banged in, she's wrong. But that doesn't need an internal affairs investigation. It doesn't. That needs your boss to ask you, tell me what happened and what went wrong. And how are we going to correct it? Whether Ruel is going to correct it by recommending she get removed, by Ruel saying that I spoke to her and I feel that she has a grasp of what went wrong and understands where things went south, and it was her people that messed up and she's going to correct it, and I feel confident in the fact that she's going to correct it. That's what you have to do. You have to feel comfortable that person's going to correct the behavior, right? To move on. But nowhere do I see internal affairs. It's overkill.
Unless
Go ahead.
Unless they're looking for somebody. So unless somebody's that is not in favor of the PC and the mayor, unless that person that they're looking to say, hey, I think we got him or her, maybe I said earlier in the when we were talking offline, I said I don't know how long she's been the CO there. I saw that she recently was assigned on September of 2025. I don't know if that's because of a promotion or whatever, but she's new there. Is she in the crowd, right? Was she in the circle? And was there somebody else that was out of the circle? So we know that I know Marlon had mentioned in the chat, Ruel was friends with Eric, and he had protection and stuff. So that could be part of it. We don't know, who Eric was, really friends with. I heard he was good with, the former police commissioner, Eddie Caban. So maybe that has something to do with it. So to me, if you sick the dogs on somebody, you're looking for blood and you're looking to hurt somebody. Because just like you said a few minutes ago, what should have been done was that hot wash to, hey, get in my office Monday morning and to explain to me what happened and what preventive measures are you going to put in place so that this never happens again. And that's what you would say to anybody, right? That's what you often talk about it, right? Is it a Is it something of the mind or something of the heart? Did you do it? You didn't do it on purpose. You felt comfortable doing it, and you did it out of your feelings. So, you have to understand that. So maybe they felt everything was going to be okay. Maybe they felt that it was a small little demonstration. It didn't need the necessity to it. But because it went bad, all right, well, going forward, what are we going to do? And that's what you would do. And then the second time that it happens, then it's a problem. Then it becomes a problem. Then it's an IAB thing where I said, hey, didn't you come to my office? Weren't you instructed? And even then it might not even be IAB. That could be just like, hey, and then it's just like last week, you and I spoke about it, that, they thought maybe the CO of the 19th, that she would take a small little hit, right? Lose her command or whatever, and then be promoted later on. That's what usually happens, right? We've seen that. But obviously she's out of the mix, and they went right to the borough XO. And I'm not saying that there's no culpability for him. There probably is, he oversees a lot of things in the borough. But like you said, when they sucked it, and they sick the dogs on them in IAB, they were looking for blood. And then that's what they got. Because I know for a fact, Eric put his papers in. He put his papers in to retire. It came up on the teletype. He has a lot. Eric Pagan, the XO, the one we're talking about, Chief Pagan, Deputy Chief Pagan, put his papers in.
This week?
He filed for retirement after this.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, he filed for retirement. It came up in the teletype. He has a lot of years on the books, but he literally he was, I guess he was forced to retire. I don't know. Were they going to ride him till something else happened? But he ended up putting his papers in. So
yeah. Listen, but also I don't know. I doubt that they forced him to retire that quickly.
I don't know.
But listen, think about it. What's the greatest thing about hitting your 20th anniversary?
Well, the best thing about hitting your 20th anniversary is you can't complain anymore because you have over 20 years. So you can't say the job sucks, because if you say the job sucks, then you shouldn't stay, right?
Well, that's the whole thing, is that I can leave anytime now. If anybody pisses me off enough or something happens where I'm just done, I can leave, right? Especially you're a chief, right? So you have a decent pension, right? He's got a bunch of time on the books, so it's going to carry him even further. There's nothing they can do about that unless they go after him criminally, right? Or try.
And I just want to interject real quick, because you say a decent pension. So it's funny, I went out to dinner with a bunch of guys that I used to work with. Most of them are all retired except for one guy. And the bill came, and for some reason they said, "Hey, can you pay a little bit extra?" He's a detective, and he says, "Yeah, I can pay extra." He says, "I'm the only guy that's not on a fixed income. All the rest of you're on fixed incomes." But yeah, you're right. But as far as I know, and somebody mentioned in the chat that he was told to leave. That he was told that he had to leave, and he did. So.
And listen,
but you're right. Is a pension good? Yeah, absolutely. But
it's possible. It's possible because again, like Marlon is saying, fire detective is saying, that certain people are connected, like you brought up, certain people are connected to the prior administration, right? So is this her way now that Eric Adams is peed off and he's got one foot out the door, one on a banana peel, and his hands in somebody's pocket, holding him up. Is she able to now get rid of people that she may have wanted to get rid of?
Yeah.
That Eric Adams wasn't allowing her to get rid of, and now this is an opportunity. And listen, I know Ruel. We were cops together in the 7-0 back, in the early 90s. I worked for him in the housing bureau. And so I know him well. And listen, he's connected to the prior administration, right? And so now, is this her way? And again, and like Marlon is saying, how many times did his name come up lately? There are other investigations of, about him being the party chief and sexual harassment allegations at different parties having that the best dress contest or something to that effect, right? Things that people didn't feel were the most appropriate things. And I'm not going to bash the guy, but there's a lot of things, there's been several different investigations that he's been connected to in the recent past, right? And I'll even throw a plug in, that he's connected to certain activities at Con Sofrito. Shout out to Sal. And so, is this her way of getting rid of him? But you don't need to. This is my point: is you don't need to. You don't need internal affairs to do that because you're looking for misconduct. If internal affairs is looking at him for the parties, for the inappropriate solicitation of funds and turkeys for his giveaways, that's one thing, because that could be possibly misconduct, right? This is not misconduct. This is mismanagement. And if you have mismanagement, you as the manager have the right to change their assignments. Or as an upper executive, what happens? I think we're going to go in a different direction, and it's time that you might want to retire. Otherwise, we have the right to take away your discretionary rank. And there's no recourse, because for people that don't know, whenever we get a discretionary promotion, we are still Captain Ronald Gleason, designated as Inspector of Police for 365 days. And every year it gets re-upped automatically. But that's their out if they want to demote you without really officially demoting you. They can take away that, they're just not going to re-up that designation. And you can make a 3-star chief a captain again, because that's their last civil service title. So people don't know that, and people may not be aware of that. But that's how they get these chiefs to leave. They're like, you can stay, but I don't longer have a position for you as the chief of housing, the chief of patrol, the chief of transit, the chief of whatever. And so if you want to stay on, you're more than welcome to stay on and be Captain Ron Layson back in Patrol Borough, Queens North. So you don't need internal affairs for that. Do your hot wash. If it comes out to the bag of shit, or if you want to make it a bag of shit and you want to place the blame no matter what, place the ultimate blame on the Borough Commander, as the Yankee guy is saying that they were working. So you could say, all right, you were working. You didn't even show up.
Yeah.
You were working. You didn't control the scene.
No, they could easily have it.
That's going to break the camel's back, and now you're out.
No, you didn't need to bring internal affairs into it. She could have easily done it just any way she wanted to. She could have just done it off the set. I never saw where a deputy chief or an inspector or a deputy inspector was told to leave or you're going to get demoted. I've seen 3-star chiefs and 2-star chiefs be told, hey, we're going in a different direction. But it's not unheard of. And like you said, it is a discretionary promotion, so they do have the right not to grant you that this discretionary status the next year. And just like Reed was saying in the chat, I also heard that the same thing that he heard, or that Deputy Commissioner Delatorre was also told to leave.
Yes, I heard that too.
So somebody else said in the chat earlier that maybe since Tish doesn't work, and I kind of agree with this statement, maybe that Tish doesn't necessarily care about Adams anymore, right? She technically has a job secured with Mandami, that now she can start cleaning the house of all the Eric Adams friends and family that she feels isn't doing a good job, and now she can say, hey, get out of here,
Reed is saying it, and it's followed up right by Hard X Connect after that. Right, her mayor is upset, and he's still the mayor, but Tish is giving notices to people she wants to get rid of, same people she couldn't touch when she was appointed due to the mayor. And then Hard X says the same thing. She can do what she wants now. Adams can't get rid of her at this point. He technically could, but he's not going to. I mean, that would be, I don't know.
I mean, Mandami would just bring her right back, right? It would be ridiculous.
I think, so, I mean, listen, I just don't. I think it's a total overreach. I think that, like you said, they don't need to do this. It's total overreach and overkill.
Hey, do you think that Tish doesn't know that she can do it without having internal affairs
that's
involvement?
possible? Yeah,
Right?
that is a good point. That's a very good point. That, who knows? Was she told? But she was probably told by Adams to have internal affairs look at it, because Adams doesn't even freaking really
You don't know either.
right? He
Right.
doesn't know the real freaking way, So is this Chief Stevenson, Deputy Commissioner White, Chief Pagan, and Chief Beltran was just told their service is not needed after December 31st. That's quite possible.
Yeah, I heard Beltran though I know he had a lot of problems with Tish when they were together, because they were both in ITB together.
Yes.
So they clashed for a long time. So I had heard, I don't know if Beltran was actually asked to leave, but I heard that he's decided that he's gonna, finally retire. So, but
yeah, because he was
they went back and forth. Yeah.
oh yeah, because he was big in the ITB. He was the up and coming ITB. Then they brought her in.
Yeah.
So she kind of like pushed him aside.
And I think Hard X Core saying that Beltran I think he was just recently dumped to CJB, right? That was back then, right? Wasn't it when she dumped him to CJB?
That was a while ago.
Yeah. So there was definitely a tiff there for a while.
And somebody asked a question earlier. They said they had a question about candidate assessment division, and can they ask that question? At the end of the show, we have a segment called Ask an Executive. So if you want to put the question in, we'll timestamp it and we'll get back to it during that segment. If you're not able to stick around, we always have the option of, you can DM us at Exec Perspective on X, or you can email us at theexecutiveperspective@gmail.com and send in your question there. And not during the show today. That's for when we're off the air, and we'll respond back to you, and if appropriate, answer on the air. But yeah, you can ask any questions you want. Anybody can ask any questions they want of us, and we have that segment at the end. So I didn't want to. I skipped past it because I'm trying to stay topical with what we're discussing, but that was there. And I just wanted
if you could just take a look at, if you could bring up JDP 0704, makes an excellent point about it was at 1802 hours. It says Tish is using IAB to substantiate whatever misconduct they can find to protect against future lawsuits. Everyone is filing lawsuits. That's a very great point. I mean, that really makes a lot of sense right there, So
yeah, they're trying to protect themselves by either dropping an EEO. That's how people that are going to do the lawsuits, they drop an EEO,
right,
to try and protect themselves from getting any kind of discipline. And this would be the reverse, right? You just trying to prove your right of terminating somebody or telling them their services are no longer needed. But I mean, listen, again, if you do an investigation and you look into a hot wash and you find out that the shit went sideways and nobody handled it right, you have the right as the overhead command, as the executive, as the chief executive, right? The police commissioner is the chief executive officer of the NYPD. You have the right to make personnel changes. We all work, when you're an executive, you work, at the pleasure of the police commissioner, where you work. We don't choose where we work. We're told where we work, and hope it works for us. So I don't know. Anything else?
No, just the quick thing. TC's funny. He says that we're taking food out of Eric Sanders' mouth. But
I don't think he's not going to be eating. He's got plenty on his plate. The whole crew of attorneys. There's so many lawsuits going on right now. Anything else on this?
No, I just, I know I've known Eric for a long time.
Yeah.
Like you and I both spoke. He was in MISD. He was, then went to ITDB. I think also he was always very helpful. I don't, I hope that he does well. I don't know necessarily if it was completely his fault, but he definitely took the hit for it. So I wish him the best.
Yeah. All right, we're an hour into the show. So just everybody, if you could, hit that like, share, and subscribe button, help us out with the algorithm. We're closing in as a network at the Finest Unfiltered network. We're closing in on 60,000 subscribers. So thank you very much for everybody for your support. We appreciate it. Right now, we got 440 people watching on the different all the different platforms. I know those of you on YouTube, you only see that there's 89 people right now, but that's on YouTube that are currently watching on YouTube. That fluctuates throughout the show, but we have a lot of people watching on X and some Facebook followers. So if you want to get involved in the chat, the interactive chat, it's best if you're in the YouTube so you can see the comments, and we could follow your comments and we can respond back to your comments. Don't forget, go over to the finestunfiltered.com. The new website is up and running. You get a rundown of all the different shows, all the different hosts, get a bio from all the different hosts. You can click on the QR code up in the top corner. Did I do it right this time?
Yeah, you got it. Yeah,
I got it this time. All right.
good.
On the top corner, click that QR code with your phone if you're watching on a laptop, and that'll bring you right to the website. We have weekly newsletters plus articles that are posted. If anybody wants to write an article, you can write an article. You can send it to us. We'll vet it, and it could be possibly posted on there. Any emails that you want to send to us, you could email us either through the website, or you could email us again at theexecutiveperspective@gmail.com. We will keep your identity confidential. We understand, especially with active members, we're not going to out you. If you have any questions or any comments, or you have any information that you want to pass along that you want us to discuss or look into deeper, you can do that. Send us information to the finestunfiltered.com or theexecutiveperspective@gmail.com. Or you can DM us at Exec Perspective on X. So feel free to do that, and we appreciate all the support.
Hey, do you just real quick? Reed brings up a point. He says, just remember back in the 90s when the Puerto Rican Day Parade went out of control, as guys were splashing women and other disorderly conduct. GO-15s were done there too, I believe. Was that Nick Estavillo? Was he in charge at that time, or was that somebody else that I know there was they went after an executive also for that. I don't remember who exactly it was, but I don't necessarily. I know he was the Borough Commander later on. I don't remember if he was responsible for that, but I think they did GO-15s and stuff, and but I don't think there was any transfers or anybody was forced retirement.
That was Jerry Quinlan.
Jerry Quinlan, right.
Jerry Quinlan, because he was the CO of the 7-0 during Abdulwima.
Yep.
And he was out of the country when that happened. And then he was the zone commander during the Puerto Rican Day Parade, and he took a hit for that too.
Yeah. And then he did all right. He got special investigations, I think, in the Detective Bureau. Yeah, I worked with him a lot of cases on the major case when we would do bank burglaries and stuff. We would set up with the major case. That was good times.
Yes, it's JDP 0704 G6. These freaking YouTube's killing us with the tags with your names. Quinlan and O'Neill. I don't remember O'Neill being involved. I know Jerry, but I knew Jerry Quinlan because he was my CO. So yeah. I knew him then. So
Quinlan was a good guy.
Yeah. Tough, difficult guy to deal with sometimes, but he was a good guy. He was a fair guy.
Yeah, he knew his business too.
Yes.
I think when he retired, I think he rode out on a horse. I, I thought I saw Mountains took him out. Instead of doing a walkout, he did a ride out on a horse.
James Moole 383 is saying that Jerry Quinlan is a professor at St. John's University School of Law now. Good for him. God bless him. Like I said, good man. Was my 70 was a CO, my CO in the 70 precinct when I was a police officer, and then kept in touch throughout the years. So O'Neill was the CO of the Park. Don't know if he was the CO at that time.
He was. I remember when he took the Park. Yeah, I think after the Park, he went to the 2-5, and then he went to the 4-4.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. We're an hour in, and we had a lot to still talk about. So again, over the weekend, we had some more chaos in the city, and there was just ICE was, I guess, preparing to go out to do some type of immigration operation downtown Manhattan, and miraculously, as they're getting ready to leave, there was a pop-up demonstration where an awful lot of press was present, and there was an awful lot, and there was, upwards of 100 protesters that showed up to the location. So the question there is, and we talked about this when we talked about what happened down on Canal Street and how the protesters just miraculously all showed up in mass during that operation, and the possibility of leaks and the protesters being tipped off, these anarchist groups being tipped off by somebody that this is where the operations are going on. Then we later find out that Commissioner Tisch was given notice of the operation. And so now Scott Mikowski, right? He's on the advisory board of the National Immigration Center for Enforcement. He's a retired ICE Deputy Field Office Director in New York City and a retired Command Sergeant Major in the U.S. Army. So that's a pretty decent resume. And he posts out on X that a reliable source has confirmed that a recent ICE raid leaks are coming directly from the NYPD Commissioner's office. According to the source, these leaks are being intentionally pushed out not only to the press, but also to domestic terrorist anarchist groups. This manufactured chaos is putting people in danger, and if it continues, it's only a matter of time before someone gets seriously hurt or worse. And Eric talked about this on the show. I'm not sure if it was today or if it was Monday. And he said it in the past where this is true, and it's a true statement. It's this type of rhetoric that's going on. And we're going to talk about the rhetoric that happened after this demonstration. We're going to talk about rhetoric that's going on throughout the nation when it comes to ICE operations. And it's just a matter of time before, God forbid, somebody gets seriously injured and or killed somehow involving one of these raids, one of these, not raids, one of these pop-up protests that seem to be tipped off. Whether they're tipped off by, as he's saying, someone in the police commissioner's office, or whether it's someone within the ICE, tipping off people because they don't agree. They're doing what they're told to do, but they don't agree with the operations because everybody has their own political views, right? But you have a job to do. And when you're in law enforcement, you're supposed to be apolitical. You're supposed to enforce the law and do what you're supposed to do. So where these protests information is coming from, I don't know, but I believe 100% that they're being tipped off somehow, somewhere, because it's impossible for them to just show up this way as they're preparing to go. And what are your thoughts on that initial part? And then we'll get into some video footage of the chaos that ensued.
Yeah, to me, I equate it to being extremely dangerous, right? So that would be like the emergency service unit, the A team, going to be doing a warrant, and somebody tips the people off that they're doing a warrant on. You know how dangerous that is? You could set somebody up for, well, first of all, whatever product or whatever people you were looking for, they could easily, it could be gone, right? It could be either taken away or the person could leave. But it also could be set up for an ambush then very easily. So when you start giving that information out, that to me is like, I don't know, that's a sin in my opinion. That's a sin against cops, because if you're going to give out information and have demonstrators know where people are going to be, that is totally against law enforcement. It's ridiculous, and having a leak come from the highest office in the police department, that's astonishing. I mean, that should not happen. If I was the police commissioner, I would do everything in my power to find out who it is, unless it's her, of course. But I would do everything in my power is and that person, that to me, that's where termination comes in, right? That's where somebody needs to be fired. If you're gonna, vital information to ensure the safety and the success of any law enforcement, that goes against everything that you've sworn an oath to. So that is terrible, And just so I don't know if you saw some of Sleepy Joe's comments, but he talks about that the protesters are able to get they're able to mobilize faster than the NYPD, so
Yeah.
it's true,
And QCBs, we're going to get into that. We're going to get into that in a little bit. But
Yeah.
it's just, it's unfathomable, because you are putting lives in jeopardy. And again, it's politically motivated. The whole thing is politically motivated because you don't believe in it. All right. We've had episodes. We've talked about it. The Finest Unfiltered Network, every show has talked about the sanctuary city laws and what does the sanctuary city laws really mean. The sanctuary city laws mean that we will not cooperate with ICE immigration enforcement. We're not going to go out arm in arm with them like we do on the Joint Terrorist Task Force. We're not going to work lockstep with immigration and customs enforcement, the Department of Homeland Security, and whoever else, the FBI, goes out on these raids to bring in people that are violating the U.S. code, and we're not going to assist in apprehensions. It also means that we are not going to ask for from a perpetrator and or a victim, when we're not going to ask a victim's immigration status.
Right.
And even though we're going to ask an immigration status of a perpetrator, we are not going to report the findings of that question to Immigration and Naturalization. Now, there are written into the laws of sanctuary city laws in New York City exceptions when it comes to violent crimes. We are not fulfilling that portion of the law, and we're just not reporting any immigration status to ICE, right? And they're saying that we have 7,000 people in custody that have ICE detainers, and we're not turning them over to ICE. We're releasing them back into society. They're being arrested. They have ICE detainers. So they've broken the law. These aren't just people, and we know they live at 123 Main Street and that there are illegals, right? And they may have an ICE detainer, right? These are people that have broken the law, have been arrested, and they have federal ICE detainers, which I've said this before, it's going to wind up in the Supreme Court because we're calling it the city of New York is calling that civil enforcement, and that we're not going to get involved in the civil enforcement of an ICE detainer unless there's an official warrant, judicial warrant that's been issued by a judge for a certain person. So we're not cooperating. But a lot of people are complaining and saying that we are cooperating with ICE because we respond to situations. So I'm going to mute it and just we'll keep talking as you know, we're just going to, there's a bunch of different videos, right? Now, this is after they clear the front out and they're trying to escort the ICE vehicles down Canal Street, right? Or is this Canal or is this Broadway? No, it's not Broadway because it's two-way. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, obviously there's violence, and when you put like John and Eric had mentioned it, I think today or the other day, when you put your hands on somebody, that's an arrest, in my opinion. You know, all wearing they all got their flex cuffs, and if they don't make that arrest, they're putting themselves in harm's way because, like Eric had mentioned, when you start going down to CCRB. That's all going to be brought up, and they're going to be like, "Hey, you pushed this guy, and you did this, and you pulled the bike from some guy or whatever." You're gonna be found substantiated, and they don't care about anything that was going on that day. CCRB is going to say you didn't do what you're supposed to do, but in my opinion, so you put your hand, somebody puts your hands on you, and you put your hands on somebody else, then that's a reason for an arrest. If they're not moving out of the way, then lock them up for discount or whatever else. So
it's just unbelievable. They're throwing things in the street. They're throwing these flower pots, throwing garbage cans, hitting cops. I don't get it. I don't get it. Blocking traffic. That's against the law.
yeah.
But with the protest settlement, we're supposed to give them the streets, right? We're supposed to give them the streets and then give them a path, right? But that's when they're protesting, right? These are demonstrations. They're protesting, but they're demonstrating, right? They're taking over the street not to protest, but to block federal law enforcement officers from doing their duties. That's a federal crime. It's a federal crime. And we're going to hear Tom Homan talk about that in a little while.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of things I see there that I wouldn't tolerate it. Not to mention, they're throwing things in the street and they're breaking flower pots. I mean, criminal mist. There's a lot of things you can get them for. I mean, I think this was the incident where the sergeant was macing everybody. I don't necessarily suggest you should do that either. Like a mass mace. If you're going to mace somebody, to me, that's an arrest also.
Right, and you got to do a TRI, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no. So, I mean, listen, I don't fault any of the SRG guys there, clearing the street and doing what they're supposed to do. But I also feel that, there should have been a better preparation, or there should have been another means of egress for them as well. So
this is Chief McCarthy, the chief of Manhattan South, in plain clothes, taking that guy down.
Yeah.
That's Jimmy McCarthy, right? Chief Jimmy McCarthy. He was my XO in Queens North before he went to Manhattan. He's giving directions, right? But this is just chaos. This is SRG that's responded, right? Because somebody called a mobilization because of what's going on. It's just garbage strewn throughout.
That's a mess.
The First Amendment allows you to peaceably protest. This is not peaceably protesting. This could cause harm to people. This is obstructing vehicular traffic. This is obstructing the flow of traffic. This is impeding federal investigations, federal works. That's a federal crime. But we're not enforcing it. That has nothing to do with sanctuary city laws. Nothing to do with sanctuary city laws. Here's another one. Again, they're walking up down. This is the one you're talking about, the sergeant that's macing the crowd. And don't get me wrong, I'm not going to say I haven't done it.
Yeah.
And, you know, the one cop wound up, there's always a cop that's going to wind up getting some mace in the face whenever you mace a crowd.
Usually it's all the cops that get
Yeah.
maced. It's,
Yeah.
you know,
But I mean, this is ridiculous. They're throwing these huge plants and potted plants in the street. They're breaking them. That's criminal mischief. Why aren't they being arrested? Why aren't they being arrested?
yeah. And listen, we all know what's going to happen once they're arrested, but you know what? You know, at least you arrest them and you take them, you know, you take them off the streets, and that's going to, you know what? Truthfully, what used to happen with a lot of times when demonstrators and stuff with SRG, when we were in charge of it, and we were there, they would, you know, you arrest a few of them, a lot of the crew would understand what's going on, and they would back off then. But then, and that's the way you do. You start, you know, cutting the head off the snake a little bit, and eventually the rest of the snake follows, because they don't want to all be arrested. You know, they want to go on their way. So
It just doesn't, it blows my mind, because people are out and they're complaining, right? Is this peaceful? Is that peaceful protest? They're trying to put up barriers, and they're physically resisting. That is not being peaceful. That
right.
is not peaceably protesting. That is actively and physically resisting law enforcement.
That's
Right?
crazy.
And again, had nothing to do with sanctuary city laws, has nothing to do with violation of sanctuary city laws. This is crowd control. This is disorder control. We were called in to clear the streets because of disorder that was going on in front of this ICE facility. Now, I'm going to agree with something that Marlon said during the show on Monday. Marlon talked about it, and he's like, why didn't they just tell them, excuse me, why didn't they just tell ICE, go back inside, close the damn garage, right? And then let the NYPD regroup. Let the NYPD sort it out outside. Let them get a pen in place. Let them pen these people up. All right? And if they don't want to comply, then you take out the orange mesh, like John said, and you corral them up and you collar them. They can't have free reign to do whatever they want, wherever they want. Whose streets? Our streets. No. Yeah, you have the right to peaceably protest. You don't like what ICE is doing. You don't like that they're going out. That's fine. But a lot of these people are paid agitators that are showing up. They go out there and they're questioned, and they're like, why are you here? And they can't even answer why they're here.
Well, that happened during the George Floyd riots. I mean, they were walking around with signs, and there was like 20 different signs. So it was like, what are you really demonstrating? You know, back then it was, some of them were saying, you know, legalize marijuana, or, you know, legalize abortions or whatever. But they were just walking around, and in reality, the protest originated because of you know, the George Floyd death. So there was just a chance for them to walk in the streets. But I totally agree with Marlon and yourself with your assessment. Why not push everybody back into the building? Call for barriers. I think you may have done that in the past for a New Year's Eve detail. That's the rumor I heard. I don't know, but you do that. You set up your things. If you remember New Year's Eve, right? There was emergency lanes, you know, that you put people in pens on both sides, and you had a nice emergency lane. So this way EMS could get by, fire, PD, whatever. You could do that. You could give them half the street. Let them be in the street. You want your street? Yeah. Here, this is your part of your street.
Right.
And then have a means of egress. And like you said, they jump over the barrier or whatever, they're a collar, you know, and then you have control of it. You know, I'm a big proponent of double barriers too, because I like to have two sections, because now they got to make two leaps. So, but yeah, that's what it needed to be done. And, you know, was there you know, a chief there? Was there somebody there, or an inspector, a captain, or even a good lieutenant or good sergeant that said, hey, let's regroup? No, it didn't seem like they were. And to try to push people out of the way, that's the hardest thing to do. You know, years ago, right? You remember we'd have mounted. Mounted could push a group out of the way. But that don't happen anymore. All mounted is a community affairs, like, hey, look at the pretty horse and the cop on the horse, which is
terrible.
ridiculous in my opinion. And I know the CEO of Mountain will agree with me that they were used effectively and efficiently. And they, Sleepy Joe says racist horses. But yeah, no, they moved the crowd. They did what they had to do. And you know what? I know none of the horses ever took a CCRB, but maybe they should have.
That's it. It's true. And then, JDP 0704, we're going to get into politicians in a couple of minutes and some of their disgusting statements and rhetoric that they're pushing forward that we feel is actually encouraging this type of behavior, right? But why no arrests? Well, there were a few arrests, okay? But there should have been a lot more. But again, like John had said, why are we escorting these vehicles down the street? They listen. There's no, if they will get, listen, if it's an ambulance and they're trying to get to an emergency and the streets are overtaken, listen, form a wedge, push them out of the way, get this emergency vehicle through. It's a fire truck. They got to get to a fire, get them through. ICE didn't need to get wherever they were going right when they needed to get going. They could have retreated a little bit. I know you don't want to give up any land. You don't want to seem like the protesters won. But listen, you got to be realistic, right? What good outweighs the bad? Right now, the bad is we have disorder. We have public disorder in the streets that we don't have control of. Go back inside because you're no help to us. You're not. I didn't see any ICE agents standing the line. Very few, one or two that we're assuming were ICE agents, and we'll get into that too. But standing the line with the NYPD, they were all standing back by the garage.
Right.
The NYPD is walking in the middle of the street, pushing people to the ground, pushing people out of the way so these vans can get through for what? Again, we're not violating sanctuary city laws because all we're doing is facilitating free movement of vehicles on the street.
Oh, yeah.
However, what are these cops doing? These cops are all lined up for CCRB in a month. There's going to be nobody on patrol because they're all going down for CCRB investigations. And you know what? They're going to be found substantiated. That sergeant, God bless him, but you're going to be hard-pressed to say that you were just indiscriminately macing at that crowd and placed nobody under arrest.
Oh, forget it. Yeah. Right. Tony Baloney, right? They mentioned that the other day on the chat.
Tony Baloney. One of my cops became a sergeant, worked for me. She actually was with him that day and got maced by that can.
Yeah.
I used to have that can too. I used it one time. When I was the CO of the Queens North Task Force, I used it one time. And it was a pretty serious situation. I used it one time, but we didn't have TRIs back then and everything else, right? And they didn't have TRIs, I don't think, when Tony did it either. But it was just a little. He was on video, and it was a little indiscriminate. I love Tony. But
I just want to just read real quick because he asks, "Do you use sonic disruptors, loud sound to disperse large crowds, or is that illegal now?" And that used to be, I don't know, when you were in task force, if they had the LRAD, the long range acoustical disperse.
We didn't have it. Disorder control unit.
Right,
Tony Raganella's unit had it at the time.
Yeah, and
that came in when SRG. Then they became more local.
Tony Vega, Jose Vega used to use it all the time. Yeah, he had the thing. But I remember there were lawsuits against that, and I think it might have stemmed out of Zuccotti Park. When they did use it, people claimed that they had lost hearing and stuff. So then they stopped using that, and they weren't able to emit the sound, but they used it like a speaker then, and they just would give like, you're in violation of 240-20 of the penal law, and you're blocking pedestrian vehicular traffic, and if you fail to move, you're going to be arrested. And that's what they would use it for. But they didn't use the loud emitting sounds like a siren or a loud whistle or whatever, so that people would disperse. They stemmed from that because of the lawsuits and stuff. So, and that's the problem. We have a lot of good equipment, and then eventually somebody sues and they win, and then we end up losing that piece of equipment. So,
yeah, and 92 Charlie says it. No mass arrest processing center was set up.
Yeah,
and again, this was a pop-up protest. So, listen, you have to activate it, right? But so be it. You got to call for more units, call for additional units, call for the the arrest processing bus, whatever you want to do,
Yeah.
right? Bring a bus in, bring vans in, whatever you got to do, bring it in, right? And get it going. But you have to take control. You can't have this. You can't have them fighting you for your barriers.
Yeah, imagine.
That just, it blows my mind, And
And those
QCB's
barriers are good. Once they're interlocked, I've seen cops not be able to get them when they're breaking them down at the end of a detail. You got to go one way or the other with it, and it's they're pretty solid barriers.
Yeah. And Marlon says the longer the situation remains out of control, the greater the likelihood someone's going to get hurt or the entire thing goes sideways. And I say the
100%.
same thing. And you could have been me, Marlon, on Monday speaking, because I use this 100 times. I've used it at scenes with Eric on the scene where things are going too long. And I'm like, listen, we're becoming the show. All right. You got to not become the show. There's a time when you have to just get out of there. It's time to go. Right. So ICE needed to go. ICE needed to retreat back into their facility, allow the NYPD to get the crowd under control, to pen them out, whatever the case may be. And then if you want to go on your operation after we clear the streets, go, so be it. And then I guess we'll pick up the situation once we get to the next location. But absolutely, the longer you let this fester, the more people are going to arrive, the more emboldened people are going to get. You're going to get these people that are going to see people thrown into the streets. Now they're going to start throwing shit into the streets. It just gets out of control. And so,
Hey, I remember during the George Floyd riots, they were doing that. They were throwing stuff in the middle of the street, and then they would set dumpsters on fire, and then the fire department couldn't even get down. And some of these dumpsters were right up against buildings. I remember one guy looking out of his building, like giving a thumbs up to all the protesters, and this dumpster was almost igniting the building that he was in. I'm like, you're happy that they're protesting? Your whole building might be up in flames in a minute. And a lot of times I had mentioned one time on the show, we use that cold fire stuff to put some stuff out ourselves because the fire department couldn't get down the block because of all the crap. Can you imagine all these people throwing stuff down there, and there was a fire, or there was somebody trapped, or an EMS call for a heart attack or something? I mean, where's the culpability there? How does that not lead into some, criminal type of complaint that, you recklessly cause somebody's death by blocking all this crap in the street? I mean, it's terrible.
Yeah. So TC is asking, do we know if there were perps in the ICE vehicles? No, they were supposedly going out to do an operation. So it's not like other times where they're trying to block them or try to get the people that are doing, the immigration, the enforcement, and trying to free them from the vans, which is like crazy. Again, to interfere with the Fed, we don't have to agree, but the feds are doing their job. That's their mandate from the Department of Justice. And to block them and to interfere with their operation, their law enforcement operations, is a federal crime that nobody in the NYPD is charging and is looking to charge. We're being told to stand down, to stand back. The thing that happened on Canal Street, right? What did the police commissioner say? She told the officers to stay blocks away. It blows my mind. It blows my mind.
Mazel Tov, as mentioned, and John, Eric, and Marlon were discussing the half circle move to pull the perp into the safe zone. Do you remember when you were in task force? So you remember you do a line, then you'd have the arrest teams in the back, open the line, the arrest team would go out, grab somebody, pull them back behind the line, and then you take that. You didn't see some of that. It was just sort of like, a little bit of chaos. But we've fallen away from that Louisiana Moan, Tommy Graham type of disorderly conduct training where we form lines, wedges, lateral support, if you remember, right? All those cool things, and have arrest groups in the middle and start marching up the street. That's the way to move a crowd, right? And then you push them forward. And, because of the kettling laws and everything else, you have to give them means of egress if they could go to the left or to the right. But that's how you do. That's how they could have pushed that crowd there. Make a line, instead of just walking up the block, pushing people and pushing them out of the way. That would have been so easy. Take a line and you walk up. If you need more personnel, wait and get more people.
Right. But you gotta put the show on pause. And the show was ICE.
Yeah,
they weren't there for the NYPD. They were there for ICE, right? So you got to take them out of the equation. And somebody in command needed to go up. Somebody in command needed to go up to an ICE supervisor and say, "Listen, we have to get this under control. We got to get this under control. We need you guys to back up. Let us do our thing, and then you guys can get out safely."
Yeah.
Right?
You're telling me that you guys go on your own or you do it our way? What's it going to be?
Right. So Jack Stern, Finest Unfiltered, producer and content contributor to the Sal Greco show. There needs to be stricter differentiation between protesting and rioting. Too often the former turns into the latter. Right. Again, protesting, you have the right to peaceably protest. Once you turn into, disorder control, where you're out of control and you have disorder control, you're on the border of rioting, right? Because you're causing chaos, you're causing disruption of the public and the public's movement and the public's right to move freely on the streets. You have the right to protest. You don't have the right to obstruct other people's rights of free movement.
Yeah, the problem is we don't ever charge rioting.
No.
Right? We always charge disorderly conduct or whatever, but we never charge rioting. When rioting requires, I believe, 5 or 10 was it 10 more? 10 more, whatever. And
it's unlawful assembly is 5 or more, right?
That's it. Yeah,
rioting is 10 or more.
And violence or whatever. I mean, we have it, but we never charge it. No.
Yeah, here you go. There's your comment from Mazel Tov earlier, right? Yeah, we have disorder control training. They weren't even but these are the disorder control specialists, right? The people that you see in these videos are the people that Mandami wants to disband.
Man,
right?
imagine.
The SRG. So these are the specialists. Could you imagine if they don't exist? And it's just the precinct personnel that are responding. Now, precinct personnel were all, after 2020, were all brought back to the academy, and they were retrained in disorder control. And in the academy now, they're all taught disorder control. But you have to practice it. And that was one thing about Jose Vega and his team. They used to come out on every tour and do a level 3 mobilization drill, bring everybody in, and do lines and wedges.
Yeah, the red letter drills.
Right, the red letter drills, right? And that was something under Tony Raganella's command when he was over at Disorder Control before SRG took over. So you need to practice it, but at least you have basic knowledge. But these are the guys that have been doing it every day since 2020. Every day they're at some type of disorder, and they had a hard time controlling this crowd. But again, why are we moving these vehicles? It does. It blows my mind. Like John said, I can't agree more. Why are we escorting these vehicles? They're not going to an emergency. It was unnecessary. It perpetuated the conduct of these protest participants. I just don't.
You have to, I always go back to ESU, but you got to slow it down and assess it. All right. Not every job needs you to respond at 100%, or 100 miles an hour. Slow down, look at what you got, and make sure that you're doing the best that you can. Okay. And it doesn't hurt. I mean, ESU talks about it all the time, a tactical retreat. There is no problem with doing a tactical retreat to regroup, assess, and make necessary adjustments so you can do it safely. And to me, that wasn't done safely. It was done arbitrarily, and they tried to do it as fast as they could, but it led to more confusion. It could have easily been controlled. So.
Right. So Neil is saying, has ICE publicly acknowledged or thanked the NYPD for their assistance in this debacle? To my knowledge, no. Well, what did the federal government do after this incident? Right? Christopher Rea, who runs the FBI's New York office, called Tisch with Special Agent Ricky Patel, the head of the Homeland Security Investigations in Newark, which covers this area, to apologize over the confrontation between cops and protesters, sources told the Post. Tisch, who announced earlier this month she'll remain as the top cop next year under Mayor-elect and longtime ICE critic Zohran Mamdani, gave both men an earful. Men an earful, telling them what happened was unacceptable. And then she goes on to say she warned, the source also warned them that such shows of force by immigration officers are putting the feds, NYPD cops, and public at risk, and that this must end before people get seriously hurt, the source added. So Tisch is telling the feds, don't do your job.
If I was that agent on the other side, you know what she would have heard? She would have heard a dial tone. That's it. I would have hung up on her right there. You got to be kidding me. Well, you know what? Don't do your job then. You know, I mean, how do you do that? How do you tell people that they're not doing their job and putting people at risk? Our job as law enforcement, firefighters, is risk. That's part of it's an acceptable risk, right? You know that going in there. So how do you not say that we're still going to do our job and you can't stop us? I mean, that is totally ridiculous that she would even say that, you know, the audacity to say that, you know, and she's one of the, you know, the notoriety of law enforcement, you know, the police commissioner of the city of New York, everybody knows it throughout the country. And to say that is ridiculous. To me, all she's doing is throwing her political rhetoric in there to maybe pacify Madami or Adams or whatever. But I hope she doesn't believe that, because that's ridiculous. You know, that goes back to my point that no law enforcement experience doesn't necessarily make you the best police commissioner, because she doesn't know what it's like to be out there, to be running after somebody with a gun, or you know, responding to a domestic and inside somebody's house, and all of a sudden it turns violent and you don't know, you know, who's your friend or foe, right? So I mean, there's a lot of things that, you know, and to say that rhetoric, that's totally BS. And I would, if I was that guy in ICE or whatever, I would have hung up on her or told her to go shit in a hat. That's what I would have said.
I got to put this back up. Warn them that such shows of force by immigration officers are putting the feds, NYPD cops, and the public at risk, and it must end before people get seriously hurt.
Okay, Jessica, we'll take care of that for you.
Listen, I have not been overly critical of Police Commissioner Tisch. She is so far off base here. Again, law enforcement must be apolitical.
Yeah.
We are to enforce laws. New York City has sanctuary city laws. We are to enforce sanctuary city laws. I don't have a problem with that. Okay? I don't agree with it. I think that we should be assisting, because laws are laws. They're federal laws. Okay? I think that it would be safer if we did assist, right? But, you know, you have a mayor-elect, and John said this on Monday, and we keep going back to what John and Eric and Marlon said, because they had a great show. Go back and watch it on Monday. They hit this for their whole show, pretty much their whole show. They went in pretty deep on it with their perspectives, And I agree with so much of what they said. And John said something that stuck with me. You have a mayor-elect, Mondami, who wants to enforce international law. He wants to lock up Netanyahu when he comes here January 1st. But yet, he does not want to enforce federal law. That's the scary thing that New York City has to look forward to starting January 1st.
Yeah, politics law. That's all that is.
And listen, this seems to be, it's only going to get worse, right? It's only going to get worse. It's going to continue. People are not going to stop protesting ICE. So what should we do, right? What happens when we know that we're going to have ongoing situations? You have to, once again, I'll go back to my wife. Prevention, prevention, prevention. Okay? So now at this point, there should be permanent pens set up, interlocking barrier pens set up outside that ICE facility. I personally believe put a fixer there. I'm sorry. I know resources are low. I know it sucks. Build a federal government, right? I think you should have 2 cops that are posted there at all times. And again, it is not to facilitate ICE operations. It is not to help with sanctuary city laws, to violate sanctuary city laws. It's a matter of public safety and public order. Have 2 police officers assigned there that are able to rapidly notify the patrol borough and operations anytime that any type of protest or crowd starts to gather at the facility. But you already have pens in place for the protesters to make it easier to pen them in, so you don't have that visual of a push and pull for my barriers, because we don't need to gain the ground. We already own the ground. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, if I remember during the RNC, I think it was 2004, where we put barriers, and they were stanchions with high fencing all around MSG. You could put, and I think they also use it in Minneapolis when they're trying to take over the facility out there too. There's ways to secure that, whether you use NYPD barriers or ICE facility gets their own barriers, absolutely. And yeah, I agree. You can have fixes out there. You can also have Taru put up pole cameras up on the poles and have it monitored down at the Lower Manhattan Security Initiative by time to see if something's going on. There's ways that we have things to monitor these things. I don't know why we're not, and they choose not to. They choose to rather battle it in the streets, and it's ridiculous. You don't win the war by fighting every time in the streets. You win the war by proper deployment before, taking the high ground, knowing all about that area. That's what you got to do. So I don't know. It's just, to me, it seems a little a little laid back. I mean, the NYPD, like you said, doesn't have to enforce immigration laws, doesn't have to enforce, the things that ICE does, but they can give support in the fact of, allowing movement in the front of their facility, setting up barriers, things like that. So hey, you know what? You don't even have to put cops there. You could tell ICE, we'll put barriers up. You guys maintain the perimeter then, so you don't have to use even NYPD resources. Give them, when I used to work with Secret Service on a presidential detail or dignitary protection, we would exchange radios. So they would be able to call. What's the big deal? Give them a radio. Let them, if there's something really bad, they can call in and say, hey, we need an additional support or whatever. So, but there's ways to do it.
Absolutely.
Will they? I don't know.
I'm going to disagree with Jack here. And, Jack Stern again from Finest Unfiltered. Don't believe all of Mondami's hyperbolic comments. He shifted his stance on most things and will collaborate with ICE to continue deporting violent offenders while advocating for others to stay. I disagree. I think that he's going to take a hard stance on this. I think that he's going to make it more difficult for the NYPD by giving direction to Commissioner Tisch to be more hands-off with these instances. I think we're going to see more of an NYPD response, look more like other municipalities around the country, one of which we're going to show in a few minutes. So I disagree, and I don't think he's going to back off of this stance. I agree that he's going to have to work with the administration in some ways, but I think he's going to stand firm, and his comments or lack thereof on incidents like this show that, and look at who his appointments are on his transition team. They're not
I agree with
pro-police.
you. I also think that when you talk about Madami and his street game, right? When he was looking to get votes, he was walking in the streets and he was talking to all these protesters and everything else. For him to go against them, I think that they're going to have major issues with him, because he was kind of like, he's walking with Bernie Sanders protesting Starbucks and how much people in Starbucks make. So I don't think it's going to end. I think it's going to continue, and I don't think he's going to bow down to ICE and give them what they want. I think he's going to maintain his belief against ICE. So.
And PBE 777. This isn't about ICE or law enforcement. It's all orange man bad. TDS is pushed by the media, and anything to go against what Trump supports. That's the root cause. Political disagreement. It's crazy. I'm not going to disagree. I've said that. We talked about that, I think, before the show, right?
Yeah.
That it's anti-Trump, anti-establishment. I'm not sure if I said on the show or before the show that a lot of this has to do with anti-Trump. They're just, everything that he says, no matter what he says, they're going to go against. And go ahead, you want to say something?
I was just so Terry Manane says we need Kaz back out on the streets. Kaz has been gone. Hasn't been making sandwiches or playing bingo. So maybe we need him back there.
And what Marlon says here, right? It's very curious how all that tech isn't used. Talking about what you talked about with the poll cameras and whatnot, when we really need them, right?
Yeah.
And you bring up, Terry Manane. I didn't see the comment yet, but brings up Kaz. I didn't see any drone footage.
No, that would have been perfect.
I didn't see any overhead drone footage.
Yeah,
giving us a tactical advantage for the crowd control and for tactical safety of the officer's safety.
Yeah.
Right? Why aren't we using the drones to give SRG an overhead view of where the crowd is and where the crowd's going?
Absolutely. Yeah. Or even like you said, a means of egress for ICE. ICE is following them down the street. If
Right.
ICE can veer off to the left or the right and take a different path, let's do that. And the same thing with aviation. Was aviation up? Because they can give a bird's eye view also. But absolutely, 100%. Drones. Oh, drones are going to save the world. But now you don't even hear anything about them.
Right. And on the note of political rhetoric, it's absolutely appalling to me that certain political figures, some of them which we've seen time and time again, coming out and supporting this type of behavior, which is encouraging this behavior, which is exacerbating the problem, which is going to cause what Commissioner Tisch talked about: law enforcement, federal agents, or civilians getting injured or worse. Brad Lander, right? He likes to go and get locked up in the courthouse, and thank God he lost his election. His election bid for mayor, and he's outgoing not public advocate. He's the financial.
The comptroller?
He's the comptroller, right? So props to the protesters who the New York Times credits for foiling ICE's intended raid in Chinatown earlier today. So many people are showing they know what it means to be New Yorkers. So that's what it means to be New Yorkers: to fight the NYPD, to throw garbage cans at the NYPD, to block the street and break huge flower pots and throw huge flower pots in the street, that's what it means to be true New Yorkers? I'm sorry, I have to disagree. State Assembly, right? Or State Senator Julia Salazar, grateful to all of the New Yorkers who quickly mobilized. How did that happen? How did they so quickly mobilize? Put their safety on the line. Why is their safety on the line? How would they put their safety on the line? They put their safety on the line by not following the orders of the police and by fighting the police. That's the only safety issue that I saw, and protected their immigrant neighbors against ICE's expected raids. They sent a clear message to the masked ICE agents hiding in the garage, get out of our city. Again, you have a state senator that is telling ICE to get out of our city. So I don't hear State Senator Julia Salazar out advocating for victims of crimes committed by the immigrant neighbors that we have. I don't see that. And I am not saying that every immigrant, legal or illegal, right? We're talking about the illegal immigrants. We're talking about those who came here illegally, that have ICE detainers on them, that have not been properly vetted to come into this country. Those are the ones I'm talking about. I don't hear anything about them. I hear them say, oh, they got arrested for doing a bad deed, but don't tell the feds because they might kick them out of the country. They have an ICE detainer. So let's not tell the feds that this guy broke the laws of the city of New York or the state of New York, on top of breaking federal statutes by coming into this country illegally and or not reporting when required to report. That's the message that you're getting from your city elected officials, your state elected officials, and this one's the best, right? Another one, City Council member Shahana Hanif from Brooklyn, right? Grateful for New Yorkers. Very, very similar tweets. It's amazing how their messaging is the same, right? Grateful for the New Yorkers who stopped an illegal ICE raid while NYPD terrorized protesters and aided ICE. I'm getting so angry. NYPD terrorized protesters and aided ICE. All charges must be dropped. Well, of course, they're not going to get charged anyway. Bragg's not going to, right? But the goal of this city council member to say that the NYPD terrorized protesters and aided ICE. The NYPD tried to clear the streets of unruly, disorderly persons that were breaking the law, that were damaging private property, and that were breaking federal laws by obstructing government officials from doing their duties. We need to pass Intro 214 to protect our communities and hold the NYPD and all city agencies accountable for violating our sanctuary laws. And Intro 214, what is Intro 214? That's a law that allows cops to be sued for violating sanctuary city laws, which she, a New York City council member, obviously does not know what the sanctuary city laws are, because everything that we showed in those videos is not a violation of the sanctuary city laws. We are not aiding ICE in immigration operations. We are not notifying ICE of immigration status of prisoners or victims of crimes. Those would be violations of the city's sanctuary city laws. What the NYPD was doing was not terrorizing protesters. If anything, the protesters were terrorizing the NYPD and anyone else that was trying to walk down the street, go shopping, go to church, go to anywhere. They're the ones that were terrorizing anybody, not the NYPD. But let's listen.
Well, I just want to just a comment real quick. JPYB4U says, Chief, there's a mobile field force is covering 26 Federal Plaza around the clock. Now, I'm not aware of that, but if that's true, that's if I remember correctly, it was I don't know, 1, 5, 8, and 40, I think, police officers for a mobile field force. So that's a huge contingency that is resource that's being, put around 24 Federal Plaza. And I'm not so sure that, it should be NYPD. I mean, there should also be some people from ICE and federal law enforcement, but that is a huge commitment by the NYPD. So I'm surprised at that. But if that's what's necessary to keep the peace, then they should be doing that. And to further your point, the ICE guys in the truck, right? They were driving. We would have done that for anybody. If anybody else got caught in the middle of that type of demonstration where they were throwing, flower pots and garbage into the middle of the street, the NYPD would have done the same thing. We would have pushed people out of the way and get them through. So you're right. We were not enforcing anything that we're not supposed to enforce within the sanctuary city laws. So, that's the way it is. So they were doing their job no matter what. So,
and I'm sorry, Angry Ron is coming out.
Yeah,
Angry
I saw
Ron,
that.
because
That's why I had to jump in. I wanted you to take a breath.
To say that just infuriated me. I'm sorry. I don't normally get emotional about this and stuff like that. I try to sit back and I try to look at things, from a clear lens and just give my perspective, right? Because that's what a podcast is. It's our perspective. It's the executive perspective from your life experience, your job experience, my life experience, my job experience, right? But spending 31 years in the NYPD and then have this disgusting person of a city council member to say that the NYPD was terrorizing the protesters just infuriates me. Let's listen to this lovely woman and what she had to say.
Hi everyone, I'm Councilmember Shahana Hanif. I represent neighborhoods in Brooklyn, including Kensington and Park Slope. I want to thank the protesters that said ICE is not welcome in our city. Their heroic demonstration shows that New Yorkers keep each other safe. What my colleague, Councilmember Sandy Nurse, shared about our sanctuary laws and NYPD breaking that law, violating that law, we as legislators are working on passing my bill into 214, the New York City Trust Act. When we see demonstrations like yesterday by the violent, terrorizing police department, it creates erosion between the immigrant communities and law enforcement. We are seeing week after week incidents that show that our city is violating its own laws, and that is wrong.
Shame.
That is wrong. Shame. The SRG must be disbanded. Yes. It must be disbanded. Yes. And all protesters who were arrested need to be free of any charges. Drop the charges now.
She needs to be charged for inciting. It's terrible. It's terrible.
Everybody wants to get rid of SRG. I don't know, man.
This is a council member. This is a person that is introducing laws for the city of New York. This is a person who is supposed to be representing the communities. Okay? And this is a person who is not even familiar with sanctuary city laws, obviously, for her to say that New York City Police Department is violating them. They did not assist ICE in immigration operations. We went deep into it. What sanctuary city laws were in a prior episode. This is not violating the sanctuary city laws in any way, shape, or form. Okay? It's unfortunate that he termed out, but we have one council member that at least came out and said some positive things. Robert Holden, right? This was a disgrace. How was this allowed to happen? How did these so-called protesters, known ICE, would be at that location at the exact time? Why were anarchists allowed to throw materials at law enforcement and shut down the streets without an immediate, forceful response? Why was the NYPD presence so limited and ineffective from the start? This was not a protest. It's chaos. I fully support the men and women of the NYPD and all law enforcement who showed up and did their jobs. What I do not support is leadership at all levels, including elected officials, putting our officers in harm's way to play politics. These reckless decisions are going to lead to a disaster if they do not change. New Yorkers deserve answers and real accountability. He's a Democrat, for those who don't know. But he's
he's a true politician that believes in safety and caring for the citizens. I mean, John and Eric had him on. If you haven't seen that video, that show, you should go back and watch it. I mean, he's such a gentleman. He really understands. I thought he had prior law enforcement, but watching the podcast, I learned that he was a teacher. But he is really a genuine person that cares about the community and doesn't care about the rhetoric and riling up the crowd to believe. He believes in the safety of everybody, and that's what you really want, right? Don't you want security, safety, things that help the city in general, not to cause violence and rhetoric that's going to incite people to act crazy. I think he did a great job, and he's always done. Unfortunately, I think he's this is his last term.
He got turned back.
And sometimes the people need to hear the truth. That's how many times, right, as a boss, you would say, I would tell the cops, don't tell me what I want to hear, tell me what I should hear, right? Because people will tell you, yeah, it's a great idea, it's a good idea, yeah, great idea, and then they'll say, nobody will tell you it's stupid and you should do it the other way. You can't be afraid to hear the truth, because you can only can make adjustments and you can make the right decision then when you have the truth. I don't want to hear that, oh yeah, you're right. No, I'm not right. If I'm not right, tell me, because I accept it. I don't know everything. I never proclaim to, but if you tell me what's wrong, then I can make an informed decision. So
yeah. So we have 795 people watching the show right now live on all the different platforms. Again, a lot of people are on X. If you want to switch over and get involved in the chat, very interactive chat we have. We try to interact and bring up your comments as much as we can into our conversation. Jump over into YouTube and log in, and make sure you hit the like, share, and subscribe button. If you are on X, share the link. Let's get as many followers as we can. As we talked about, the Finest Unfiltered Network is closing in on 60,000 followers. So again, this is not localized to New York City. We've seen it around the country. And most recently, we had, and somebody brought up in the chat earlier, we had Brian O'Hara is a police chief in Minneapolis.
Is he?
And he came out and made some, I think, inflammatory statements. So let's take a listen to the good Chief O'Hara.
Good chief.
Masked,
good words.
that they're not sure if they're law enforcement, that they may be kidnapping people. Like, we have had those reports. I want to be clear to the community. The community should know that if you see something like that is legitimate, that you don't know if someone is law enforcement, you should call 911. And you should provide as much information as possible, because let's not forget, We very recently had tragedy in this state by someone who was purporting to be law enforcement. So please, let's be clear. That's something everyone should report, and that we will immediately respond to, and we will document. Whether it's somebody's not sure if there's a kidnapping happening, somebody's not sure if there's law enforcement present or not, and that's something else that's additional policy requirements that we are implementing, that we will document and report these types of things anytime that we hear it, and reminding our officers of their duty to intervene. If there is anything that is, a violation of someone's human rights or civil rights, excessive force or anything like that, they absolutely have a duty to intervene as police officers.
They like the bobbleheads in the back. They're just sitting there nodding. Yeah, what he said.
He's saying without saying, call the police on the ice. Call the police on ice enforcement, on any federal enforcement. Call the police. Because they're kidnapping people. How many times have we heard this? They're kidnapping people off the streets.
They're kidnapping the people that are violating the ICE statutes. You know what scares me the most? Okay, people listen to radios. I know the NYPD, some have encrypted radios, but they listen to the radios, the scanners and stuff. Now you have a group of people that want to protest ICE. So now some poor citizen calls up and says, hey, there's masked men and they're taking it. So what is that? That means everybody, hey, there's a protester mobilization point. Now they all respond over there because they know exactly where ICE is. So it also gives up their position. Maybe that's what they want too. But listen, he's a chief law enforcement officer, right? He's supposed to represent law and order. What is he doing? He's playing freaking politics. And how many times do we see that where you're not a chief? You're not a chief. You're a politician then, okay? Just what you should be saying is, well, we're not going to, whatever. We're not going to, help ICE or whatever, but you don't need to be calling up 911 every time. Like we said earlier, Ron, remember we said, okay, one van doesn't pull up usually. It's a big caravan. There's usually, a large contingency of ICE officers. There's guys in, they have heavy vests on. They have ICE on the back. I mean, they're easily identifiable. So, I mean, what's the real problem there, So, I don't know. I just think it's more rhetoric. I think it's more him showing the mayor, look, I support you and I support, our sanctuary city, and we're not going to support them. So, but
TC
I just think it's a terrible thing.
I didn't see the whole press conference. TC is saying the mayor started talking in Somali at this press conference. I'm not kidding. I didn't see it. Do I doubt it?
I know that was one of her issues, right? They were picking on the Somali people there, so probably. But that's crazy.
Let's see what the border czar has to say in response to this chief of police.
But they're saying we're not working with you. Doesn't matter what you uncover, I guess.
Look, I'll say the same thing I said to other chiefs of police in sanctuary cities. Shame on you. I mean, your number one responsibility is the safety and security of your communities. And ICE is targeting criminals. So for you not to partner with ICE to make your community safer is shameful. He ought to put his badge in the desk drawer and walk away, because he stopped being a cop, become a politician. If a true law enforcement official would work with ICE, okay, look, I don't want to be an immigration officer. I'll leave that to you guys. But when we have an illegal alien public safety threat in the community, I want to be shoulder to shoulder with you. I want to help you make my community safer, because the chief of police, that's my number one responsibility. If he wants to watch, stand aside, do it. But if you cross that line, Pam Bondi and her U.S. attorneys are waiting to prosecute anybody that impedes law enforcement, ICE law enforcement, Border Patrol law enforcement in doing their job. Zero tolerance for impeding ICE in their operations.
That's what we've been saying, right? Yeah.
Sorry. I have to applaud. And I'm getting a text here, and because that person can't comment in the comments. If ICE can wear masks to protect themselves, why don't NYPD or other law enforcement? They are taking the same chances, retribution. I'll let you speak on that because that's something that we discussed earlier that hasn't come up in the conversation. So because we both agree that it's kind of a bullshit move.
Yeah, in my personal opinion, I don't necessarily know that they need to wear masks. I mean, NYPD officers get doxxed all the time. You know, we had Internal Affairs Bureau call the police on a retired lieutenant that we know, John McCarry. So,
50,
you know,
50A.
50A is
50A.
all out there. I mean, these are all things. People can find your information out. So there's really no, you know, and that was part of the things that we say. That's why, you know, you didn't wear a shirt, NYPD, when you're on the job, right? You didn't wear rings and stuff, so you're not easily identifiable. But hey, again, that's part of it. You know, I don't necessarily believe that each one of these officers that wear a mask, it's not necessary. You know, so I just think it, and I also believe that they should wear. ESU got in trouble years ago when they made entry into an apartment, and the individual in the apartment took a shot at them, and he didn't get prosecuted because he said he didn't know they were cops coming in. Right. So we had to make sure that everything on our heavy vest said police, and it had to be police. It wasn't like emergency service unit, because they don't know what that is either. Some people will come into this country and don't know what emergency service is, but they know the word police. So there would be police on the front, you know, emergency service on the back. You still had to wear your patches, had to be visible. Even when we had protectors on our shoulders, with ballistic protection, on the outside of that ballistic protection, there were patches. Some were subdued, so they didn't shine the color up, but they were a patch, so you could easily identify the police officers. So that's what I believe should be done. They should be a little more identifiable. That would stop the rhetoric that, you know, our good friend Andrew Wolf is saying. But you know, and the masks, I don't necessarily believe I mean, I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to protect their families, you know, their kids and everything else. But you know what? Remember the Supreme Court when they started violating laws, like doing demonstrations in front of the Supreme Court justices, and you know that there was laws against that. So there's laws that you can do. You have to enforce it, and that's unfortunately that's part of law enforcement. You know, you have to be able to do that.
And I'm going to ask this person back, why is it that every single protester is wearing a mask?
Yeah, exactly.
Every single, you know, the person is saying to me, masks are pure intimidation. So every protester is wearing a mask, right? So listen, I agree with you. I don't think that there's a need for them to wear their masks. They're getting doxxed. I'm going to do something I don't normally do. I'm going to share the screen, and I'm going to just show people really quick, because every NYPD officer is out there. They have their name on their shield, right? We've seen cases where people walk up to cops, run their name, and start belittling them for their histories, right? So let's just take this. This is 50a.org, right? Let's put me in. Oh, look, Ronald Layson. I jump right up, pop right up. Oh, look, there's a picture of the big guy. There's my former commands where I worked prior to that, my text, my LinkedIn, a hyperlink to my LinkedIn, a hyperlink to my personal Twitter account, tells me about my complaints in CCRB that I've had for my entire career. I had one complaint with 4 allegations. All of them were unsubstantiated, right? And that was back in 1994. So with 120 arrests, I think I did, you know, and I was only a police officer for 5 years. I think I did pretty good with CCRBs. But, you know, and then it comes down. You could talk about my lawsuit. The one lawsuit I have against me was, you know, because I was the commanding officer of a precinct at the time, and they just dropped my name into the lawsuit as being the commanding officer. So talk about being doxxed. You just look at my name on the street in 2 seconds. You pull up my entire work history. You pull up my picture. You pull up my personal account.
I just want to jump in real quick. When you talk about personal, let me tell you something. On my 50A, I had an old picture. There was an old picture when I was on the job. And you know what they did?
You want me to run it or no?
Yes, go ahead. Since I retired, they put up a new picture of me. So I was retired and they still put up a new picture. Okay. So I don't, that was a picture that we used on when I first got on the podcast, when I was interviewed by John and Eric. That was the picture. That was not the picture that I had originally. The picture that they had originally on my 50A was a picture of me giving an award to one of the officers that was retiring from the Special Operations Division. So they even up to date did that after my retirement,
right?
Which is not right.
Yeah,
so
100%. And just for your 35 years of service, 0 substantiated complaints. Just to point that out.
Yeah, no, I had a few, but they were.
We had 3 complaints. Oh, that's not bad. You were an active guy. You had 3 complaints and 0 substantiations. But listen, CCRB was different when we were cops. I got to say that. CCRB was different when we were cops. It wasn't as weaponized as it is today towards the cops.
No.
So listen,
I always tell the story that when guys would come in the precinct and I want to make a CCRB, that you'd have to give them the form, right? Because you couldn't do it online. There was nothing online. Right. And then they'd ask for a pen, and you'd have 2 pens here, but you say, I don't have a pen I can give you. So
listen, and the reason, and then they give you a complaint for not giving you a pen, but you're giving them a weapon by giving them a pen. That was the excuse, whatever you want to call it, for not giving them a pen.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And protesters are not wearing masks, not to get arrested, because I agree they are often committing crimes, but that doesn't excuse ICE. We're not excusing ICE either, but again, they're not breaking any laws.
Right.
By wearing a mask, they're not breaking any laws. They're not breaking any department guidelines. And technically, an NYPD officer could wear a face mask also if they wanted to.
Yeah, when the weather, right? Yeah, do you remember when?
I'm not even talking about the Bevilacqua, Baklava, whatever the hell it's called, right? I'm not even talking about that. If they felt that they're in an area like that, and we know that these protesters get right in our face. So for my medical safety, I want to put a mask on.
You mean like a regular mask? Oh,
yeah. Because a lot of the protesters, they just wear either surgical masks or KN95s or whatever the case may be to hide their identity.
Well, there used to be a law on the books that 3 or more wearing a mask,
right?
That was I think a violation or whatever.
Sure.
So
it was unlawful assembly or something, right?
Yeah.
All right.
But that chief should step down, in my opinion. That's not a chief, Again, your politics. Why don't you, hand in your gun and your shield and run for governor, or run for mayor, or run for senator, or some state assembly, because that's all you're doing. I'm sure you'll get elected.
And here Reed's bringing up, it wasn't a female sergeant; she was just a female police officer. And yes, he ridiculed her and made her actually cry. She's a human being, and you're bringing up a DWI arrest and all this other stuff.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
And they ridicule other cops. Oh, you only made $57,000 last year, blah, 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 as a rookie cop, whatever the case may be. Because you can walk up to a cop with your smartphone and you could run a 50A in 2 seconds. You saw how quick it was. 50A.org, boom, put Layson in there. Ronald Layson pops up, click, boom, my history. 2 seconds. I did that live. That wasn't pre-recorded or anything. I don't like to do the share screen thing because I just don't like the operation of it. But I just did that. I just shared the screen and just ran my own 50A, ran your 50A in 2 seconds. That's what people do in the streets to us.
No,
so I agree. Is it right? No. Is it an intimidation factor? It probably is. Is it against the law, against any kind of policy? No, it's not. So just like the protesters have the right to wear masks, law enforcement have right too. We have rights too. And they say that it's for their safety, that they don't want to get doxxed and everything else. But, it is what it is.
Hey, listen, they're walking down the street and they're doing their job.
That's it. All right. Let's that person earlier on did not put the candidate assessment question in the comments. So if they're still with us and you want to put the question in, you have anything further, Rob? We're already 2 hours and 24 minutes into it. We're supposed to be
no
times. So let's move on to Ask an Executive. This is where Rob and Rob answer questions from the chat. So if you have any questions, please feel free, jump in the chat with a question. I don't recall any questions that we haven't answered during the show. Rob, you have anything logged down that you normally?
No, I didn't see anything in the chat at all.
And I checked our email address and I checked our X account, and that person did not put in a question.
I think Delray has something.
All right, so here we go. So as a CO, commanding officer, when a subordinate put in for a detail, what was your criteria for determining? Not recommend, recommend, highly recommend, activity, CCRBs, evaluations, sick record, or likability? I did not take likability into account. Everything else was taken into account. And when you say activity, it's not about quotas. It's about performance. And it's about, listen, we're law enforcement officers. You are a law enforcement officer. It's part of your job to go out and enforce the laws. And again, I've talked about this in the past. When I was a commanding officer, I always was very specific at my CO's meetings. And when I talk to people, that you do not compromise your integrity for the sake of activity. Everything that we do activity-wise, right? When you talk about activity for those non-police people, you're talking about summonses, arrests, things like that. Everything that you're supposed to be doing out there, you're supposed to be doing to create a positive change. Whether you're writing moving summonses, you don't write the BS taillight summonses because it does nothing. They fix the taillight. You could correct that by pulling them over and telling them your taillight's broken and you need to get it fixed. They're not going to pay the summons. You're wasting your time. You're wasting their time. You're wasting money on the city. You're not doing anything. Write summonses that are going to correct bad behavior that are causing injuries and deaths, right? Quality of life offenses, write things that are going to, write summonses that are going to increase the quality of life, make arrests that are going to make a difference, okay? So that's what I talk about when I'm talking about activity. CCRBs, you have to take CCRBs into account, but you should be monitoring your CCRBs as you go along. And again, when you're looking at CCRBs, again, that's more for the person like Rob has talked about in the past. When they come for an interview, you're going to be looking at that person's CCRB history. And again, just because people have CCRBs doesn't mean that they're a bad cop, doesn't mean that they have a bad attitude at all. But a lot of times when you see the same offense over and over again, you have to sometimes take a little more question. And when there's substantiated after substantiated, because again, we know that it's weaponized. And when you're being realistic about things, you have to understand that, like I just said before, CCRB is a lot different today than it was in the past. Evaluations, obviously, how you work and how you're evaluated by your supervisors makes a difference on how you're going to be recommending someone for a different position. And sick record, again, if people can't count to 4, and those on the job know what that means, if you can't count to 4, shame on you. Why are you going chronic? If you're not chronic, it doesn't matter. If you're chronic because of legitimate illness, pregnancy, some type of protracted injury that you were out for more than 40 days, so you went chronic, that's different. Then you take that into consideration. That kind of washes it off. But yeah, you take all these things into consideration and then you make an assessment, because technically when I'm signing that CO's recommendation, which is what you're talking about here, I'm putting my name behind that person. Rob?
Yeah, no, I totally agree 100%. Like, I've done it. I put a few, I just put recommend because there was factors in what you just described that I didn't feel that that person would be a good candidate for that particular position they were applying for. And I also tell them ways that I think that they can improve to get to that highly recommend, because we all know that if you don't have a highly recommend, you're probably not going to get the interview, right? So I know that, you know, the career advancement, look at those, and especially for like some ESU and some other positions in SOD, if you don't have a highly recommend, you're not even eligible to get a interview. So, and the only other thing that I would add other than everything that you said, I would talk to the supervisor of that particular person, because I would just make sure that I, as the the XO or the CO, might not have all that information. I might know you on paper, but I don't know you personally. And I usually go to the sergeant and the platoon commander just to get an overall view of that person, because I want to make sure I make the proper assessment as well. So,
Yeah.
no.
So Sleepy Joe has a question. When you hear operations to Central, shot spotter activation at X and Y, are they coming from 1PP or Borough Ops? And 92 Charlie answers the question for us. It comes from Operations Unit Chief Department's office at the Jock.
Right.
And then
That's
Sleepy
if they're
Joe-
working, right? A lot of them aren't even working anymore.
Yeah, yeah. So Sleepy Joe's got another question. Who decides the layout of barriers? Someone at 1PP or the CO of barrier section? The CO of barrier section sends you the truck. That's all the CO of barrier section does. They have nothing to do with it. 1PP, listen, if it's a big detail, 1PP may get involved. The barrier configuration for details starts literally at the precinct level. And usually a lot of it has to do with your community affairs officer and you sitting down. You have to go out and do site surveys and walk the area. You have to know the area, and you have to have the barrier configurations. You have meetings at the borough. If it's a big detail, you'll have pre-meetings at the borough where you'll go over these things. You use Google Maps, you use Google Earth to get overhead views of areas to decide what's the best way, where you need to have wood in case you have to open it up for egress or emergency vehicles, as opposed to the metal interlocking, where sometimes at some details you have officers assigned with the orange mesh barrier so that they stand there with the mesh barrier across, and then they'll open it up during a parade for pedestrians to cross or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I mean, I know that they used to, in the borough, they used to have, a detail section in the back of the borough operation. Would, make sure everything was done right, previous events, and decide how many barriers and how many things they need. And then it would get approved by, borough commanding officers. So, yeah, I mean, it goes through its chain of command, and it goes on past experience at a particular, section. It also matters. I've had it where it matters, if there's other events going on. If you have a West Indian Day parade going on, a lot of barriers, you're hard to get, some barriers for your own command. Sometimes they'll just tell you, we're just bringing wood. And to me, wood doesn't work really, because people could just slip underneath the wood or go around it. Metal barriers are where it's at. But so.
Yeah, 100%. 8311, NYPD 8311 has a question. Executives demoted, how long do they maintain the salary? I don't know how that works. So if you're a chief and you get demoted, does your salary go back? I would think it does, right? I think if you're a sergeant and you get demoted, I think your salary will go back to that rate of whatever your commensurate to your rank.
And I think that's why a lot of guys retire instead of take the demotion. They may take the demotion and then say, I'm leaving, because there is going to be a decrease in salary. So, yeah.
Yeah. Headlights is a quick comment from Reed, which I totally disagree with, and it annoys me. And I would actually flag these if anybody was doing it, and the cop would be spoken to. Headlights were a good summons. Cop got his number, and if civilian fixed it right away, they can get it tossed out. I understand what you're saying. You're saying, oh, I'm not hurting the civilian. I'm not hurting anybody in their pocket because they can just get it fixed. But to be honest with you, those types of summonses are more of an annoyance to the community. They actually drive more of a wedge because they feel like they're being bothered for the simplest little things, which they are. You can very easily increase police-public interactions and by pulling them over, informing them of the infraction, and just giving them a warned and admonished. You don't have to write them a summons. So I disagree with getting bullshit numbers for numbers. just because they don't hurt somebody's pocket. I'm not looking to hurt anybody's pocket. I'm not making any money for the city. I'm not making any money off the summons. Neither is the cop. What I'm saying is write a summons that's going to correct a bad behavior, something that somebody's going out there doing something dangerous so that they do not hurt themselves or hurt somebody else.
When I was the XO of the 2-3 and used to have to go down on traffic stat, and Chief Scagnella would yell at you for getting those headlights and taillight summonses because he said they mean nothing. They mean nothing to you. And I can remember walking into roll call and telling the cops, and they were astonished that I said, I don't want you to write any equipment violations for the fact of just writing and getting a number. I'd rather have zeros on equipment violations. I can deal with that. So, like you said, I'd rather you warn and admonish, pull the person over, tell them, hey, your headlight's out. It builds a relationship with the community. You'll be thanked. Thank you, officer. I appreciate that. I didn't even know. How many times did you pull somebody over for a headlight and back in the old days, they would get out of the car and they bang the headlight and the headlight would go back on, so, yeah. But I told them, I said, don't write them. And they were like, really? And I'm like, yeah. I said, it doesn't mean anything. So, I agree. I mean, and I wouldn't look for numbers from cops then. I would say, listen, I'd rather have you write no summonses than write write those summonses. And like you said, I can give you, accident prone locations and, do enforcement there. I'd rather have that, write a red light, write something there, because to me, when I'm going down the traffic stat, it's going to be, how did you address the condition at these accident prone locations? And I can say, well, here's enforcement at those particular locations. So it worked out for both of us.
Before we get yelled at, somebody's going to correct us and say they're collision prone locations now.
Now the collision prone. Yeah.
So Reed's got a follow up. I had an MOS with an extensive sick record, but when at work, she produced good numbers, so we gave her a highly recommend. Again, I don't know what her sick record was for, if it was a legitimate injury, if she had an extensive sick record because of a chronic illness, or if it was due to pregnancy related or whatever the case, and gave good numbers. I don't know what that means. So it depends. It's a case by case basis. Everything is.
Yeah, no, I mean, and there was also a point where they told us not to take into consideration somebody's sick record, because you can't evaluate somebody that may have a condition. It could be some sort of a bias. I don't know whether they have a particular illness. Let's say, God forbid, they have cancer and they're going through treatment and stuff, so they go sick a lot. It wasn't fair to make the assessment that this person has, won't be at work, is sick when they're going through something. So you have to take into consideration. You have to know the person, right? You have to know what's going on with that particular person. So you just can't take an overall, look at their central personal index, the CPI, and say, oh, this person's sick, too much. No, you have to find out.
All right. Let's do a couple more. State of Dihana, do you think that they'll do away with mandatory transit overtime that consistently takes away officers' RDOs and mess with quality of life? They need to send all the new recruits to transit if they're so short. Shake my head. According to the NYPD, transit crime is down substantially. And according to Mayor-elect Mondami, he's going to send in the social workers. So hopefully January 1st, the overtime will be cut in transit.
And I think that's a big thing. I mean, that's a big dilemma, this mandatory overtime, and causing people, to lose your RDOs and or stay late. And when you finally get home, you're driving home, you're exhausted. When you get home, you're exhausted. It's dangerous. So I think, like John and Eric had spoken about it today on their podcast, that's a morale killer. So I mean, that's another way to bring back morale, is, stop this BS mandatory overtime and let the officers have their RDOs and let them have the time to themselves, the time to rest and refresh themselves. It's important. It's mental health is important, right? We talk about it all the time. So,
all right, let's do two more. Give Delray another one. As a CO, how is it determined who should be on the Department Recognition Board? I always liked my special operations lieutenant to chair the board. just because I think they knew the cops the best. I always ensured that there was people from patrol squads on the board. And for people that don't understand what they're talking about, Department Recognition Board in the command is a supervisor and I believe 3 or 4 cops. I don't remember the number. And they are looking at department recognitions that are submitted supposedly by the supervisors, because that's another big pet peeve of mine. It's department recognition, not self-recognition. We've talked about that in the past. And they are submitted for, actions that they took, police work, arrests, whatever the case may be. So there's a board of a supervisor and peers that vote. After you read it, you look at the supporting documents and you vote on whether that person should get a certain type of medal and what level of medal that you're recommending. And then it goes back to the precinct commander for approval, disapproval. The precinct commander could recommend and change the type of recognition that they get. But I always like to have my special ops lieutenant as the there is no rule of who's on it. There's a rule of it has to be a supervisor, a certain amount of cops, whatever the case may be. That's in the patrol guide. But there's no rule on who you select. I personally like my special ops to be the person in charge, but made sure I had representation from patrol on the board.
Yeah, I mean, I handle it in 2 different ways. I handle it as regular medals like EDPs, meritorious accommodations, and decided, huh? EDPs, EPDs. My bad. I'm so used to dealing with ETPs. But I would bring in, like you said, supervisors. I would definitely bring in, rank and file, and then we would go over it. Read the scenario, whatever they wrote, and then vote on it. And then I also had the opportunity to do it on a borough level when I was the XO of SOD, that we would do it for unit citations, submissions for that. We would do it for, they would come down from, I forget, from personnel. They would give us like citywide things, like whether or not it should be a combat cross, whether it should be honorable mention. So we would also do that. But I would always make sure that we had, good representation from each rank. And then I always want a union delegate also to be on there, because they know the people, they know what they're doing. So and regular cops too. It wouldn't be just a union delegate, but I would make sure that was the delegate, and then there would be police officers or detectives, whatever we're reviewing. But it's interesting reading the things, and believe me, I never really knocked anything down. I either kept it what it was, or I elevated it. Huh?
I did. I tell you, Eric, yeah, because even as the borough commander, because if it's for a commendation or above, right? Because excellent police duty is the lowest. I'm getting the mom text. Almost time for Survivor.
Oh boy,
we got to get off the air before 8 o'clock Eastern time, so mom can watch Survivor. Then you had meritorious police duty. Then you had commendation, and then above, so for excellent police duty and meritorious police duty, the precinct commander was the final say on approval or disapproval. For commendation, it went to the borough, and so the borough will put together a committee to go over all commendations and above. If it was above a commendation, they would either approve it at a commendation, drop it down to a commendation and approve it, or if they approved it for a higher medal than commendation, they would forward it to the honor committee at One Police Plaza. I personally had, when I was in Housing Borough, Bronx, Queens, Eric Dim was the chairperson of PSA 7's honor committee, right? He sent up some commendations, and I'm looking at them. I'm like, these things are barely meritorious. and you're sending them up for commendation where there's like a serious risk of serious physical injury or death. I'm like, did you look at this? Well, I don't want to deny people, blah, 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 blah. I said, we got to be fair. And I understand it's not fair because it's not fair. It's precinct by precinct. In some precincts, any gun collar is a meritorious. In some precincts, routine patrol, if it's a radio run or whatever the case may be. I get that. But I have absolutely knocked them down. You put the committee together. Sometimes they want to be a little generous. But I bring them in and I'd be like, guys, let's talk about this. How did you come to this conclusion? Am I missing something? Am I missing something here? And let's be fair. This is not a meritorious. This is like routine patrol to EPD. I just, it is what it is. Not to be mean, but just to be fair. Just to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, you have to read them. That's the thing. You just can't sign off on them.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
All right.
I mean,
so let's do one more, and this is Thin Blue Dev 7970. What are your thoughts on the NYPD Auxiliary? Is it a good stepping stone into the department for a young person who is not 21 yet? How do you see the program changing in the future, for good or bad? You want to take that one? Or
I mean, I always say it's commendable to be a NYPD auxiliary because you're basically wearing the uniform and you're doing everything there that a normal police officer looks like he's doing, but you're not wearing. You don't have a gun on you. So to me, it's a commendable thing. I've dealt with a lot of auxiliaries on Thanksgiving Day's parade, New Year's Eve, details. I tell you one good thing about the auxiliaries is when you ask them to stand on a post, they stay there. They don't yeah. If you ever have a detail with narcotics cops, after you turn them out, they disappear.
Oh, so everybody used to break my chops. Why are you taking the rookies?
Yeah, exactly.
Detail. I said, because when I go to meal and I come back, they're going to be standing there.
Harry Whedon tells a great story. He has the detail and he has a narcotics captain. And he goes, all right, muster up your guys from narcotics and have your sergeant lieutenant put them on the roster. And the captain goes, Chief, I don't want these guys on my roster. And Harry Whedon flips. He's like, are you freaking kidding me? They're your guys. He goes, yeah, but they all disappear.
It's true.
It's true.
It's true. I love those fresh rookies. You got a bunch of guys standing around in crisp uniforms with their hats on their heads, and they're looking around like deers in the headlight. Come here, guys. Come here.
Yeah.
I got you. All right. Let's do. There's two quick ones right here. What was your favorite command to work on as a CO or as an executive? I would say, whatever the case may be. My favorite as a CO, precinct-wise, if you got to go between the 111 and the 110, total different animals. I enjoyed both for total different reasons. So I really enjoyed being a precinct commander. But the title of CO, the best place, my favorite place was Queens North Blast, the burglary, larceny, apprehension, suppression team. Did some phenomenal work. Great guys working and girls working for me, doing some unbelievable burglary apprehension work, some really cool tech stuff. That was my favorite spot as a CO.
Well, I was never a CO. Ron, you were a CO? I didn't know that. No, I'm just kidding. I was never a CO. I was the acting CO of the 2-3 and requested the command when I was told I wasn't going to get it because somebody else was getting dropped in from 1 PP because Commissioner Kelly said, oh, anybody that wants to be promoted has to be a CO. So that put me on the back burner. And then when I was the acting CO of the emergency service unit, obviously that was the best, the best I ever had. I wanted it, but incident happened. I was removed from that position as the acting CO. But whatever, that's it. You got to take the good with the bad, and you move on. But as the acting CO of ESU, I was like a pig in the pen. I was happy as a pig in poo, man.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. All right. We'll give you last one is Lily to you.
Okay.
Rob,
she says, Rob, did you like working in the precincts or as a chief? Did you have politics of the chief, or is that the PC? Well, I loved working in the precincts. I was in numerous precincts as a police officer, the 4-1, sergeant, the 2-5, lieutenant, the 4-0, the 4-4, and as a captain, I was in the 2-5, 2-3. I'm sorry, 2-3, and I loved them. Did I have to deal with politics? Not as much as the chiefs above me, but you get drummed down a little bit, but you have to live with it, right? You just live with the politics. Did I force all the bullshit politics down on the poor cops? No. You're kind of able to filter it, right? So that they don't have to hear all that BS. So yeah, I mean, politics is part of it. And you know what? As you get, if you got promoted above 1 star, 2 star, there's a lot more politics. 3 stars, all politics. So, I was lucky not to be involved with too much of it. So, but thank you for that, Lily.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for your engagement.
You want to do the super chat, Ron? Or?
Yeah, I'm gonna get that. I want to thank everybody for their engagements. We really appreciate it. We love everything that you do to help us make the show flow. It's not just our conversation; it's everyone's conversation, and that's what it is. So yeah, we have 2 super chats today. We really appreciate it. This is from our friend Arbad, Powder Mill, but he goes by Arbad, but it's not coming up as Arbad right now. 60K subscribers. What a joke. Everyone knows the actual undocumented sub count is 10 times that figure. Everyone still on the job watches without subscribing. The Finest Unfiltered, not the other FU, the Finest Unfiltered is the place for the NYPD truth. Arbad, thank you for your continued support. We really appreciate it. Thank you for the $19.99 or the $9.99. Rob made me go out today to the store and get some Twizzlers. I'm not going to eat it because I don't want to get yelled at by my wife again.
It was on sale, right? After Thanksgiving
Actually,
sale?
It wasn't on sale. I usually buy them on sale. So
all right.
It wasn't on sale. I paid full boat for them today. But yeah, it's the truth. I run into so many people that say, "Oh, I love the show," and I'm like, "Oh, you watch the show?" Yeah. Past executives, retired executives, cops on details. When I run into people, I've had people come up to me and approach me and recognize me from the show, which is nice. Plus other people that have known me from the job that come up and say, "Hey, I love the show. I love watching the show." And I'm like, I wish I saw them in the chat, whatever. But we know that they're in behind the scenes. So Arbad, thank you for that. We really appreciate that. And then NYPD 8311, another supporter of the show. We really appreciate that. Great platform. Hard to pick between shows, but enjoy this one the most. Thank you very much. That means a lot.
I appreciate that.
We have a very strong platform on the Finest Unfiltered with John and Eric and Marlon on the original New York's Finest Retired and Unfiltered podcast, 8:05 Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then you got the Sal Greco show. Sal had his own show, came over onto the network just before we started our show. Then we started our show on the Executive Perspective, and then you have Tom Joyce, Pete Faselli, who have been an asset to the network. All helped grow to this almost 60K actual subscribers. But for you to point us out and say that you enjoy this the most, we really appreciate that, because we know that you do watch the other shows because we see you in the chats on those also. So we really appreciate that. We appreciate all the super chats, and we appreciate all the comments in general. So with that being said, any final thoughts, Rob, before we get into the rest of the shows? Because it's
just everybody be safe. I believe it's the tree lighting. Is the tree lighting tonight?
Tonight is the tree lighting at Rockefeller Center. Tomorrow
Right. So
night is the national tree lighting at the White
yeah. So if you're working the detail, be careful.
Be safe.
Keep a head on your swivel. I mean, you think it's a great detail. It's an easy gig, but just remember, anything could happen. So just stay safe out there. Thank everybody in the chat. Thank for all the comments. Thank for the super chats. Appreciate everybody, and just hope everybody has a safe and enjoyable weekend. And we'll see you next Wednesday, Ron.
Yeah. All right. So again, tomorrow you got the Sal Greco show at 1:05 p.m., 13:05 every Tuesday and Thursday. So tomorrow Sal will be on at 13:05. I don't have the information Marlon, do we have anything? If you could throw that in there, if you know who Sal has on tomorrow, I'm not sure who it is. Then on Friday, we'll have the roundtable with Marlon, Eric, and John for the Finest Unfiltered 0805. Then they'll be back again Monday morning, and they'll be bringing you all the latest news and everything else. Next week, they should have a retired Inspector Ken Quick on, who just published recently a study based on a non-NYPD survey on job satisfaction, why people are leaving the job. They talked about that today on the show. They're going to actually have Ken on. Ken's a friend of ours. We've known Ken for years. It's funny. I spoke to Ken yesterday after he posted that publication about coming on our show, and he's like, John already asked me. I'm going to go on their show. So John beat me to it. So that's good for them. That he'll be a great guest. I'm sure we'll have him on later on, either to go over his career or to have him on as a subject matter expert. Very intelligent guy. He's a college professor now. And then on Tuesday, Sal again, we'll be back 13:05, and then Tuesday night at 19:05. Sorry, I did it, John. At 19:05, 7:05 p.m. Tom Joyce and Pete Viselli. Pete Viselli should be back from his cruise. Hope you enjoyed it. If you missed it, go back and watch last night's show. There was a Brooklyn North reunion with Tom Joyce and with special guest co-host, retired Deputy Chief Mike Marino. And they had retired Lieutenant Detective Commander Squad Concelli from Brooklyn North Homicide. So go back and watch that podcast. And then again, we'll be back next Wednesday, 5:05 p.m., 17:05 for John. As we close out the show, we broke 1,000. We have 1,042 viewers right now. So we really appreciate the support. We really appreciate everything. Go back. If you missed part of the episode, go back and watch it on the rewatch on you can watch it on X, or you go back and watch it on YouTube at any time. So until then, everybody, we appreciate it. Be safe, and we'll see you next week.